Any earlier than noon?
Yeah, I just did noon because I know, like, I was like, well, if Paul or Peyton want to join for like a lunch
Because I
hour.
can join you. I have to work at. I think I have to work until 30.
Okay, I'm flexible. My
Maybe
morning
I'll
is
just respond.
Oh, yeah?
And just say, hey, I can meet you closer to.
whatever time works. And then, yeah, just say we spoke. We're going to come together at like 11 or something. And then we can ask
About Thanksgiving and
like one of them can join us.
oh yeah, we have it. I probably have to leave it on something.
I gotta get different things on it to wear for Christmas Eve.
Well, I think it's probably most of our meetings fall on some major holidays. So like Christmas Eve, we can do that.
Mayor,
The turn this one?
that's pretty sad.
We had
but
an
then I feel
old
like, yeah, maybe you're
Vitamix
just gonna
and
take
I
it
think the motor burned out. Turn it on, turn it off. And you turn it on, turn it off. So then I'm driving for I make a ton of stuff for the kids.
On Tammy.
We're on, Mayor, at 6 o'clock. We're ready to go.
Good evening, everybody. We will. I welcome you to the February 14th, 2022 regularly scheduled work session. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody in the room and their significant others. Tonight, there are 4 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card. And if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember that this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of the item. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. Will the city clerk please sound item or agenda item A?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be happy to. That first item is Milton Equestrian Committee update. Mr. Greg Botello.
Get him set up. I'm actually just have the honor of introducing the members of the Equestrian Committee. While we have a lot of people who work with them, I'm one of the many people from the city who do have the pleasure of working with the Equestrian Committee, which, as you know, is unique to our city for good reason. It reflects the rich equestrian community here and it's part of Milton's heritage. And today I'm going to introduce Tony, who will introduce several other members of his committees who are here to talk to you today. Just as a point of reference, that the Milton Equestrian Committee is an advisory body. One of its main charges is to give advice, insights, and views to city officials like yourselves. So that's exactly why they're here today. So I'll start by introducing Tony. Now, set up the slideshow. There we go.
Thank you.
Wait, where'd it go? There it goes.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it very much. My name is Tony Rich, and I'm the 2022 chair of the Milton Equestrian Committee, and it's a pleasure to spend some time with you all tonight. We really do appreciate it. We've had this on our agenda list for quite a long time, and it just seemed like a great time to start a new year to come up and give you a little update on things that we have worked on in this past year, and then some of the initiatives and projects that we're hopeful to get done this year. Early part of this year, after our new council members were sworn in, council member Jacobus reached out to me and asked me to go to lunch. And, that's always a loaded request because you never can tell if you're going to get fired or if you're going to get questioned or what the case might be. But he and I had a great conversation, and he had a lot of great questions. And some of the things that we shared with him, in all fairness, I don't think he had heard before. And so since we have 3 new council members on city council this year, it just seemed like a great time to try to get on your calendar and to come up and to give you all an idea of some of the things that we accomplished last year, and also ideally some of the things that we're hoping to accomplish this year. So we appreciate the chance to do that. So here we are. Let's start high level, see if I can work this machine. Hey, that worked out. So if we go back and we remind ourselves, the Milton Equestrian Committee was created in 2016 by our mayor and city council, and three ideal purposes were created for the committee: to introduce and manage equestrian initiatives, to enhance the quality of life for the residents and business community of the city of Milton. Number two, to encourage local exploration, generate civic pride, increase tourism, and showcase local equestrian land, equestrian businesses, and equestrian initiatives. And finally, to advocate for, promote, educate, and participate in the selection and interpretation of equestrian initiatives and equestrian events. So fairly straightforward. The 2022 Milton Equestrian Committee, as you can see, David Borgel, Nan Buckner, Susan Day, Susan Kimball, who's our vice chair, Brian Maloney, myself as the chair this year, and Julie Shannon, who we bribed to be our secretary this year. So we hopeful she won't quit the job mid-year. So when I first agreed to be the chair of the committee, I was given great advice on trying to narrow down what we wanted to work on into a very short list. They said basically that the more things you have on your list, the less you're probably going to get done. And so for the first year last year that I was in the chair role, we agreed to have 3 subcommittees and areas of focus. This year we added a 4th, so that these are our current priorities and subcommittees. The first is equestrian facilities and amenities, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's all of our green spaces, all of our parks, all of our amenities that we hope either currently have or will in the future have equestrian access. Marketing and PR, which is really telling our story, building a brand for the city of Milton, and basically promoting our equestrian heritage. Susan Kimball is the lead there. Community relations, we added that this year, which is really bringing all of our residents together, equestrians and non-equestrians, to try to find ways to just get our community spending time together. And then finally, farm ownership challenges and issues, which all of us that own property or own farms realize that sometimes there are unique aspects to owning a farm. And so anything that really affects farm owners and equestrian owners, we really wanted to focus on. And Susan Kimball has agreed to lead that as well. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what we're doing and what we've done. And I'd love to invite our leads to come up and tell you a little bit about what they're working on. So, Julie, it's all yours. Up and down arrows. Right there.
Okay. I'm Julie Shannon. I'm the secretary this year, former chair of the MEC committee. And essentially, I have a special place for all the trails and passive use parks for the equestrians and the city members. That's what I like to focus on, and we have met with Sarah Ladart several times, along with other members of Parks and Rec. We've gone out 3 different times, identified places to get our immediate work done. I have seen some progress, but it's been slow coming. Tony and I have gone out several times and reorganized and rethought some of the ways that they wanted to do parking and bridges that we wanted to improve, and various places we could improve Birmingham Park, because Birmingham Park is our main equestrian park and it really should be better utilized for all the citizens. So one of our main goals is to get an action profile on what we can do to improve this park and how to get it better used by our citizens, both equestrians and non-equestrians. We have other preserves and other passive use parks that we'd like to see improved. I think a lot of work has been done in preparation for that. So basically my question to you is, how can we prioritize these works to be done? Is Parks and Rec on it? Do we need to help influence them even more? What can the community do to help us move this progress along, because I started on the 2016 MEC, and we started with Birmingham Park to begin with, and I'm still on it, doing the same thing. And we've done very little progress as far as allotting funds. We've done a lot of planning and a lot of examining of how to improve it, but not a lot has been actionable. So I'm here to offer any help I can give you to move it along, answer any questions of anything that you think we could do as our committee to see council allocate funds and push forward on the improvements to be made. Prioritized plan highlighted a multi-tier approach. I was on the Trails Committee, so I also know that we worked diligently to create various places that we could improve. Parks and Rec designated a lighted equestrian park area. We plans to create and install new trails connecting the parking areas so that safety is concerned. They're planning to put a water source where there already exists a well. They also plan to have gated access so that we don't have just anybody roaming all over the place. Repairs to the trails and the updated signage has been courtesy of our Girl Scout troop. And we also have, every year, we have a cleanup day that MEC organizes, that all the citizens, and so many citizens from the city and from surrounding areas, come and help us clean up those trails manually so that we can use what improvements have been made. And the bridge replacement was the thing I think was a stumbling block in terms of financing. So we looked at ways to improve that. Tony and I have gone out there twice with Parks and Rec and Public Works to look at how to improve that bridge so that it's safe and we won't have to use the main road further on down where the grade is too steep. So there's a lot of good things that have come so far, and I'm representing MEC in terms of how we can push this thing along, because I believe there's money to do it.
Councilmember Morgan?
Yeah, Julie, thanks for the update. What would be your top, as a equestrian committee, what's the top thing if you want a council to get behind something? What is it that you're really looking for your top priority?
I think that Birmingham Park is the clear gem of all the preserves and all of it's like a signature park for our city. So if I had to say, I would go with that first tier of things that the Trails Committee already identified and put money there and start getting to work on the projects. The projects have been in the planning for 6 years that I know of. So I think it's time.
Is parking the first thing then, of that list at Birmingham Park, is parking the first thing that you're looking at?
Parking and trail safety. Yeah, parking and trail safety. And those have already been clearly identified. And there's some other projects that have gone on with some of the other preserves that we think could work, but that Birmingham Park needs to start yesterday. So I think that your best use of your funds and your time are getting that going with the trail system, becoming loops instead of single trails that end up in a dead end of nowhere, and getting the parking there where people can actually use it.
Steve, follow-up question. What do we have allocated funding for Birmingham Park in our last budget? We allocating funds?
We have plenty of money for our passive parks and active parks. Maybe I don't know if this would be an appropriate time. I asked Sarah Leaders to be here just in case we got any questions related to the improvements we discussed tonight, because many of the things have been brought up. We are scheduled for this year.
That's kind of what I thought. Okay.
If the council wants to hear any of the plans that are under Birmingham Park, is one of the parks that we've focused a lot of attention on, including the parking, the water, and the trails. Sarah could talk about the impediments that we found with the bridge, but
I think that'd be good, and if she can, yeah,
if that's what you'd like to hear.
Yeah.
I think that would be wonderful if council can brief MEC on a timeline for how these things are going to progress, and if we can assist in any way, that would be helpful. And I think Tony and I will make ourselves available as needed.
Thanks.
Hey.
She
Speaking of
happens to
people.
be here.
Just before Sarah gets rolling, Tony Rich and I had a chance to talk on Friday, and I'm feeling like there might be a communication issue here. And as we move further into our next iteration and having a new liaison to the board, maybe we look in how we can better improve that two-way communication. Sarah, if you don't mind.
So just hit a few highlights on Birmingham Park. Met with the Equestrian Committee a couple times out there. What we wanted to come up with first was a layout so we could properly bid the parking improvements. So that's a couple things we've talked about is moving that equestrian parking away from, it's currently kind of in a grassed area under the power lines. So moving that to a designated area, fencing off the public works yard area and creating a secure and kind of a gated area for that parking, doing some lighting for the parking, and then getting the well working. So we're right now getting all those details put together in a bid document that we're hoping to also include some elements at Freemanville, Birmingham, and have this ready to award to construction by the end of April is the timeline we're looking at. So really the first step is getting all those bid specs together, which is what we're working on right now. And like I said, we've had a couple meetings on the site to walk those areas. We're also connecting that equestrian parking into the trail system, into areas. So there'll be some minor trail work going alongside with that bid.
Any questions? Councilmember Moore?
The Birmingham, we're talking about Birmingham and Freemanville, that corner where we own the property. Is that kind of in that same timeline? That's part of the initial, so we could actually open that up or have people start if they wanted to ride their horses in that area?
It is. We'd like to bid those two together. They have very similar quantities or materials and scope. So our goal was, that one's just a very simple exhibit that we've already got together, a little bit of fencing. So our goal was to bid those two together with a anticipated award, like I said, the end of April.
That would probably also include, because we're looking at doing a roundabout in that area, including if we do any changes to fencing, tie it so we're not building and then tearing down.
Right. This would actually move it a little further away from the roundabout so it can remain in use, and there'd be any temporary fencing done with the roundabout to keep it a secure pasture area.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Moore?
I don't know if it's a question for, I guess it's a question for staff, maybe Steve. Whose charge is it these days? I know at one point, one of the targets we had talked about was the putting Birmingham Park into some sort of a conservation trust or something that would protect it for perpetuity. Who owns that project?
It is deed restricted, but that is does not necessarily meet that same objective.
Right.
I don't know that it's an ongoing project. That may be a council-driven initiative.
Okay.
I'd like the ability to get back to you to make sure that I don't misinform the council.
The reason I bring that up is, as Julie said so eloquently, that it is our jewel, especially for the equestrian community. We have other assets that may be of great value too, but that one in particular meets a lot of the equestrian community's needs. And if it's constantly, not constantly, but if it's in play for other activities, including active, which kind of comes on and off the table from time to time, it'd be great to kind of put that perpetual argument to rest and ensure that it stays a passive park with that kind of protection.
Let me only offer this. So to the extent that its funding source was a particular dedicated funding source, that may help prohibit, but if it wasn't.
It was not, no, it was pre.
And if that's true, then you get into, can God build a rock, he can't move. The point simply is that the council and even future councils may have the ability to change their mind. I just want to caution y'all on that.
So the reason I put that out there is it'd be a shame to make some of these investments when we know that it's important to keep a separation of those kinds of activities and the population that comes with a different kind of a use in the park than passive use, like trails, hiking, and certainly the equestrian community. Make those investments, and then a couple years down the road, we decide we need a square or triangle there, or rectangle or triangle.
If the council would like to further discuss potentially putting that park into some type of conservation easement, staff will gladly run with that
Yeah,
direction.
I mean, I was just saying on a personal basis, I have no problem with that, but I think we have to look at our future parks plan first before when we get some more active parks in the system, then I think we absolutely can.
Okay.
But I think the city attorney's point, I think it'd be a good step in the right direction. Doesn't mean a future council might override us, but at least they know we can do it. So.
Yep. Great. Thanks.
You have a question?
Yeah, along the same line, maybe when we look at Birmingham Park again and look at, now that we've got new council in place, and look at, you're talking about a specific area to start a plan meeting some of their requirements, but maybe we take a look at the overall plan versus just saying we're going to put it in conservation. Let's look at how we would like to utilize that park. And one thing I know I've talked about in the past, we don't have any space. We have trails, but we don't have a space like if you wanted to go out, have a picnic with your family or someplace. We don't have anything like that. This park, that may be part of that. We could build into it if we're looking out 10, 15, 20 years. Preserve that kind of as an aside, maybe a portion of that park in addition to the equestrian use.
Yeah, the trails plan itself for the park is a good one. And it's been massaged a number of times over the years to include both separate space for the activities that you don't want to blend because of the size of the horses and the issue of dogs on or off leashes, all the things that come along with that. So I think a review of that would serve us well. So thank you.
Sarah, based on the scope that you were just talking about, where we're going out for bid, and hopefully that's complete by the end of April, what is the timeline then to complete what we have set forth, like in the scope moving forward?
So the construction timeline, we would set an estimated timeline in the bid and then allow the respondents to say the number of days it will take them to complete. Between the two properties, just have to look more into what that time frame looks like, but it's not, I mean, some of our roundabouts can take as little as 8 to 9 months. So it'd be less than that. That's, the higher end of a construction estimate. So, I mean, I would think we would put in there somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 months to complete these two. But again, it's kind of part of the bid process.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Tony? Thank you, Julie.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
So you said, let's see. Okay. I'm Susan Kimball, and I'm going to talk to you now about the marketing and PR efforts that the committee's been working on, that the Equestrian Committee's been working on. One of the things that we've had some fun with is the Barn of the Month that Greg's been great helping us put that together, featuring a different farm each month, hoping to encourage citizens to submit not just the really lovely fancy farms that you see on the main drives, but they're small barns that house, any beloved animals. So that's something that we're working on and have had some success with that. We'd like to see a link on the city's webpage that has specific details about equestrian activities in the area. We'd love to have a listing of businesses within the city, anything that can help people bridge that gap. People that are actively involved can find resources, but one of our goals is to help people that drive around Milton and love to look at the horses and maybe have some curiosity about the horses, but we'd like for them to be able to figure out how to get involved, and that it's not an exclusive community, it's inclusive, and we want everybody that wants to be able to pet a pony or ride a horse, whatever it is that appeals to them. Let's see. We've been trying to have monthly articles that we've partnered with the Milton Herald to highlight some of the many, many accomplished equestrians that have thrived in the city of Milton for a long time. And that's been fun to bring those people to light. And we've highlighted the Lionheart Works and different civic organizations and want to keep going with that. That actually, part of that came from as well. We were hoping to do a tour of barns to bring people into these lovely facilities. That idea was originally happening right when the pandemic first started up. So we had to rethink things, but we had some interesting creative things come from rethinking that project. So it's not all bad. We've also been trying to help the city with their branding efforts. Actually, personally, I've provided a whole lot of photographs. I'm always photographing my animals. So we've been able to use those in different capacities with marketing materials and on the city website outside of the Equestrian Committee. And we're also hoping to have some artwork, equestrian themed artwork. That's in its infant stages. We've been discussing how to make that happen around the city, a few different ideas. We'd love to maybe have different bronze horses around, or maybe we've seen painted cows in different cities, maybe painted horses, just to have that equestrian branding repeated again and again and again around the city. And that'd be fun, engage the community. And that's pretty much what we've been working on. I don't know if you have any questions now, or we want to talk about it at the end, but I know Nan's going to present community relations next.
If you have any questions, just go for it.
Just a quick question. We've got this as a strategic item in our strategic plan. Would we cover that on another meeting, or is there anything you want to update us on that? Relative, I think it was mainly focused on PR, but not necessarily just local, but how do we attract even nationally, trying to be known as that type of community so we don't see horse farms disappear.
Right.
If there are people that are looking for large
And that was part of our engagement with the Milton Herald, was to try to have something out in the press that's beyond just our immediate area with App and Media, because they run that, more broadly. We talked about different real estate engagements that might be appealing, but we haven't gotten any traction there at this point.
Greg, would you mind coming up?
Sure. Sorry. We actually,
here we go.
This is for example, this is actually the Modern Luxury, which is so this is actually one of our Jenny Doyle has a advertisement to people of certain income bracket, I guess, to advertising with the horse here. First thing is equestrian heritage. So that's kind of one of these partnerships that with Jenny we've worked with previously. So we're trying to forward to more of those partnerships. In addition, in the next few weeks or so, we're going to have a draft kind of ad that's, we can't point to a specific real estate agent.
Right.
But I think it's Chronicle. The Equestrian Committee is helpful. There's certain publications, Chronicle of the Horse.
Chronicle of the Horse.
Things like that, ways to reach, and they actually help for programs of different events that would deal. So we're going to have an in-house ad to start. So that's hopefully in the next few months, we could start placing these things. The problem is that in terms of what success is, I mean, you could have the most wonderful ad in the world and gets no horse farm saved, or you could just do nothing and get 10 saved. But you can do your best. In addition to this, so that's kind of beyond that. We also have the branding, placemaking, and that broader strategy. So the idea is that we'll also be folded into this, but we don't want to wait a year for that to happen. So it's kind of this is the first stage. But again, with the partnerships like these with real estate agents who drive, or with something we can do ourselves to drive people to Milton. So eventually, 2 years from now, there'll be even more, but we're going to try to do something the next few months. So.
All right, I'll let Nan come talk to you then.
Good evening. Here. Hi, I'm Nan Buckner, and I am the lead on the Community Relations Subcommittee. Community Relations and the PR kind of overlap, so you may see a little bit of overlap here. We had our first event at the Crabapple Festival. We had a table this year, and what we found was that saying the word equestrian is not that scary. A lot of people had a lot of questions. It was a great question and answer period. We handed out over 500 painted horseshoes. I think they were gone by, 11? I mean, we ran out. So there was a lot of interest there. Logistically, it's hard. We want to try to have horses at Crabapple this year. Tony and I both have some minis at the very least. Maybe we can bring those, perhaps a farrier demonstration. But there were a lot of questions asked, and a lot of people were interested in maybe having some sort of resource through the website for where their child could take lessons or where they could have a pony party or things like that. So we kind of our initiative with that is to perhaps link something up, with the city website to have a resource for people who, like I think Susan said, for people that don't know. The Birmingham Park Cleanup Day is a big event. It's a lot of fun. If you know much about riding horses, showing horses or anything, it's really all about the stories. And there were a lot of pretty fun stories about how some of the city employees interacted with some of the community members. It was a lot of fun. So it's a great opportunity to get everybody together, and even non-horse people that just enjoy nature. It's a great thing. So we want to continue to do that. We're partnershiping with some special needs organizations and local youth organizations. I think you all are familiar with the Lionheart Schools and their Works program. So we want to really try to enhance that and make sure that people know that that's available. It's been a pretty successful thing. The Milton Disability Awareness Committee is going to try to get involved with that as well. And the Girl Scouts that did all the signs for all the trails, we're going to try to communicate with some other Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops, or other youth groups that may be interested in assisting us in those kind of things. It's kind of a fun thing for them to earn a badge. I think probably the biggest thing that we did this year was our partnership with the fire department and the police department. We had the technical large animal emergency rescue team demonstrate for us. We went to the fire station 43. They told us all about their procedures. We got to put our hands on everything. There was a great interest in perhaps establishing some sort of liaison within our group to help them. So that's kind of led us to, we found out that policemen and firemen are sometimes scared of horses. And while they're great in emergency situations and they know all the protocol for that, they may not know how to lead a horse or how to catch a horse. So one of the things that we've put together, we're working on now, we're establishing a curriculum, if you will. Each of our committee members is going to take a crew to our farm, and we will instruct those gentlemen or ladies on how to catch a horse without fear, how to lead a horse without fear, what typical horse body language is, so that they can be more comfortable doing those jobs in an emergency situation, because it has to be second nature. Horses being flight animals, it's not just that they're in trouble, but they can hurt you because they're in trouble. So we want to make sure that they're well trained in that. Another thing that we determined was there was a need for some new equipment. The equipment that they have, they've got the beautiful tripod, which is wonderful, but the technical large animal emergency rescue unit itself is probably a 30-year-old truck from Georgia Power. It's not four-wheel drive. There are a lot of problems for them to try to get into areas where, a horse may be down in a creek or flooded or something of that nature. So we want to try to work with some various youth groups, maybe Georgia Hunter Jumper Association juniors. You guys may remember Georgia Hunter Jumper Association raised the funds for the sling. So we want to try to have an initiative to get some of those youth groups more involved and perhaps raise funds. There is a definite need for a new vehicle. So that's something that we want to really, really work on. COVID put a damper on a lot of things, and probably the biggest thing was the Meet the Neighbors event. We had one in 2019, and we've not been able to have that again. It's a great opportunity for businesses. You guys know me. I own a tack shop. I have the only tack shop in Milton. I mean, I'd be willing to put a booth, bring bits, bridles for people to look at, handle, whatever. And I think there's a great need for other businesses to be able to familiarize the citizenry with that kind of thing. So we'd like to be able to do that again. And then the tour of barns that Susan mentioned earlier, that was also kind of tabled because of the COVID pandemic. But these are initiatives that we really, really want to push forward on. And well, we don't really need a lot of funds for that. We just need to be able to have you guys behind us and make sure that it's what you want to do too. So other than that, I don't think I have anything else. Can I answer any questions for anyone?
Councilmember Moore?
Nan, I've got a question about the truck, the next generation type of vehicles that if the city's able to think about a
Yes.
newer solution for that. Is it a truck always that's the solution, or are there ATV type of vehicles that are being used today? And the reason I ask that is as we're contemplating some of the ATV solutions for some of our park patrols and park grooming and response, if there's a way to combine that effort, it might be a way to accelerate the solution. But if it's not a big enough vehicle, then
The problem is that there's a lot of equipment that needs to be taken to that actual scene of emergency. There are sleds that downed horses can be rolled over on, that they can be, pulled out of. There's head bumpers, there's all the medical supplies. It's a lot more than could be handled with an ATV.
okay.
So I've got some photos. If you want to see some photos of our demonstration, I took some pictures of the vehicle. They have, it looks like backboards and all kinds of chains and helmets and things. I just don't think an
Okay.
ATV would.
I was hoping for efficiency, but if not.
There is, the interesting thing is there's a particular sales organization that sells these things to municipalities and rescue groups and such. And it's my understanding that the fire department has to go through their training. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of vendors for that type of equipment. If it may be just kind of a, okay, you went through our training, now you got to buy our stuff. So I'm not sure exactly what all that entails, but I think that's something that, we want to try to raise some funds for.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Jacobus?
Steve, have we ever looked into what it would cost to replace the vehicle they have?
Yes, the fire chief is very much on top of this. He's researching different options. I believe that he had discussed this with the Equestrian Committee and seeing where we can go with it.
Other? Councilmember Johnson?
How are you going collecting data on all the farms and who does what in the area? I mean, I think that there's such a need for having that information out there.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I've been doing this for 58. I'm 63 years old, so I know a lot of people in this area, and I know most horsemen and what they do. What we did, one of the things I guess I didn't tell you about was the map that we did for, I don't want to focus on fireworks because everybody thinks that we're all just crazy and don't want fireworks. But one of the things we did right before the fireworks was I had Courtney Spriggs compile a map of all the horse farms that I knew, and I requested people to get in touch with me, tell me your address so we can map you. And we put that on the GIS and found that the overlay of farms was very, very close. There's a lot more horse farms there. So that's one of the ways we've compiled the information. I guess the rest is just from local veterinarians, local, my tack shop's a great resource for that because
Greg?
We did do a survey. We actually solicited, unfortunately, we went through business license and we also solicited, not saying that every single one
Well, and when you start
Especially like lessons
surveying,
and-
when you start surveying people and asking them about their business licenses, it's kind of a scary thing because we act like we're policing whether they have a business license or not, and we didn't really want to come off from that aspect. It has to be volunteer where, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Everyone knows where Shannondale is. A lot of those farms are very, very apparent. And if you're out there teaching and taking kids to shows, pretty much everybody knows who you are. If you got a shingle out, we know who you are. It's easy to find. I guess the private owners are the ones that are the biggest concerns. And they're the ones that come to us and say, hey, we have a problem with this. Can you help us? It's not out of the ordinary for us to have public comment at our meetings. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, I think you did. I think there's just such a need for that I was just
Well,
curious.
and I'm not going to lie. I've not been on the committee that long. I think I'm barely here a year. So that was one of the things that I did want to try to get done. So anything that you guys have in regards to questions about any of this, feel free.
Can I add some of that?
I'll take over.
One of the things you'll see on, Susan Kimball's going to come up and talk about farm ownership, but an equestrian census is kind of on our wish list. And to Greg's point, we did a survey a couple of years ago. Last year.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a volunteer thing. It went out to all the addresses and, whether or not someone responded, it was kind of up to them. But wouldn't it be nice to know how many horses we have in Milton? I mean, just a number. Hey, there's 850 horses in Milton, or maybe I'm off by a mile. I don't know. But how many, how many farms are there? How many farms over 5 acres are there? How many horses are there? How many horse businesses are there? I think we found out a few months ago that there are only a handful of farms in all of Milton that have applied for a business license to operate. Like there's almost no one that's applied for a business license in Milton to operate a training facility or a boarding barn or anything like that. I had no idea. And it's not like, I don't think it's that expensive to get a business license to board horses, but I think just to get people to comply, and all of a sudden people don't want to start releasing their information because they think all of a sudden the city's going to charge them thousands of dollars just to board horses or something. And I don't think I think it's an education thing, and just, it's a matter of trying to incent farm owners and equestrians to want to give the city their information so that we can answer that question.
Well, and there's a lot of overlay too with the Department of Agriculture because they have their license through the Department of Ag, but does the city of Milton really need that? So I think if we could get some clarity there, I think that would help everyone.
Yeah, agree. So, so if we can, just get the resources that we need, and, we can certainly try to come up with something that would enable us to reach out and get that census information and try to figure that out. That'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, I know, Nan, we had spoke before. Appreciate all you're doing. I think hearing what Juliet was talking about too is it's not necessarily just the businesses, but what are our hobby farms, what you talked about, Tony, trying to get a kind of the whole thing, because there are 5 acres, 3 acres, 6 acres, people who are boarding their horses that they like. They're not doing it for business, but it would be nice to kind of, especially when it comes to fireworks and that type of thing, the more concrete data we have to know how big is this community around Milton and where are they?
And it's hard too, because you may have someone who has too many donkeys. They still qualify as, a farm. You may have someone that just has a couple of mini horses and they just feed them and love them, so it's really hard to, what's going to be our qualifier? You have to have 4 full-size horses, or you just have to have one. Or it's really complicated.
There are not going to be that many farms in Milton that run these large commercial operations.
No.
Right? I mean, we could probably put a handful of us together in one evening and figure out every big farm in the entire city of Milton. But it's the 3-acre farms that have 1 horse or 2 or whatever. I mean, that's really the heartbeat of what this culture is about, right? Is the hobby farm. So I think, that would be such valuable information, and then we can figure out how to go from there.
Well, I think it's important too, if we're going to attract people to come live here, I think it's really important that we have those figures and that data. So anything you guys could do to help us, or we're here to help you. Feel free to call me if you have any questions anytime.
One last question. Do you have a date set yet for the cleanup day for 2022?
We're looking at either March the 12th or March the 26th, I believe. Saturdays, we're going to talk about that this Wednesday night in our. Those are the 2 dates that we're.
Okay, great, thank
You
you.
guys want to let us know your availability?
26.
Later is better.
I'll be there on
26, we want the
26th.
mayor there.
I'll be there on 26.
All right.
I'll bring kids too.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think we're at an interesting point in time where this committee is staged for some very visible next steps. You guys have done a lot of hard work in the last several years to sort of create the foundation for this stuff. And we've talked since we became a city about the importance of the equestrian community to us. And we, it's obviously in our brand, and we talk about the things that large lot incentives and the kinds of things that you hope are supporting the committee and the community. And we think about our green space. We've never had necessarily choreographed effort to bring some of that forward. And I think where you guys are you're on the cusp of some branding and outreach to the community will probably put us in a great place because of the hard work you guys have already done. So I think when we put some of this stuff into the media choices that are available to us, this could be a really interesting springboard year. And you clearly have all of our support to do our best to turn these things into reality. And I think maybe that's when some of these smaller equestrian community members, whether it's individuals or smaller properties, whatever, may feel a larger embrace from us because we are more public about our support. So I look forward to that being a reality.
Yeah, well, and your all's support of these smaller efforts are really valuable to us because, as you say, we can build on that and hopefully have a larger impact that benefits the whole city and the vision for the city. Kind of going back to that, quantifying the number of horses or the horse owners or the properties, which is that's something I've been a little bit obsessed with from the start because I'm just sort of a numbers person and I want to have, there's always a vague reference, like there's this 3% number of, there's only this tiny little population that actually has horses. Well, at least I'm in the northern part of Milton. In my area, everybody has horses. It's hobby farmers. It's smaller lots, maybe 3 to 10 acres. And they're everywhere. If I count just my immediate neighbors, those that I know how many horses are right there, that's larger than some of the larger farms, the show farms that I work with. There are more horses right there. They're just owned by different people. They're backyard horses. And that's as somebody else I think said, that's kind of the heartbeat, I think, of our equestrian population right now in Milton. And that's who I really want to connect with. And I want to know what their challenges are too, how we can help them, how we can support them, what they're curious about. And it's a struggle because we don't have a list. We don't know how to really find those people. They don't know we exist either. They don't know there's an equestrian committee that's here. When we at the Crabapple Fest was great to just chat with people, and people came up, speaking of farm ownership, came to me with just different issues that they were having. One gentleman said that he wanted to build a little barn to how he specifically bought in Milton, and he wanted to have kind of a miniature farm. He wanted a miniature horse and a miniature goat and whatever, just a little menagerie. And that was his dream for his family. And then he realized that he could build a doghouse, but he couldn't build a very small stable, not a big elaborate stable, but a shelter for a mini. That wasn't allowed, according to what he had learned within Milton. And I said, hey, he didn't take me up on it, but I said, come to our meeting. Let's talk about this. I don't know all of those rules, but I'd like to know what your issue is. I'd like to connect you with the people that can help you, and we can change something or not, but anyway, that's what we're trying to do. Going back to kind of quantifying things too, we're wondering if the city can reach out to the state with the Department of Agriculture. So every horse legally is supposed to have what's called a Coggins test, I won't get into the nitty gritty of all that business, but that is not everybody probably has it. Certainly all the show horses do that move around, but the state, the Department of Agriculture should have that. So is there a way that someone within the city can reach out to them? And that might be a step one to figure out how many horses we have in Milton and where are they? Beyond that, I don't know beyond that how that might work, but that's just a suggestion. I don't know how to implement that. I know I personally, Susan Kimball, can't just call them up and get that information, but
We'll give it a shot.
yeah, that might be
Yeah.
that might be
No,
a
that's
way
a good idea. Thank you.
a way to get to that. Other things within farm ownership that we've talked about and worked on. We're always curious about tax incentives that may entice people to keep their large lots. Trying to educate we've had a couple of different education efforts for those that might be interested in CUVA. We've discussed having another education effort, different large lot incentives. And, so we're always looking at ways, talking about that. We haven't, and that's where you all can help as you discuss things. And there have been some positive changes to encourage those larger lots. I think that's so important because we can't stop somebody from selling their 35-acre farm, but boy, if it could be not sliced up into 1-acre lots, that's a step in the right direction. And wouldn't it be great if they had a little barn for like that gentleman that wanted his menagerie in the backyard? Be super if that could happen, and we could make that easy for those people to do and not have a lot of regulations that make it difficult for them to, for instance, put in a structure to protect their miniature horse from the elements. Equestrian zoning, say it's all that same area. Let's see, what else have we talked about here? Census, we've definitely covered that. Okay. Fireworks, Nan touched on that briefly. We have an ongoing effort to educate the community. That's our first prong, is to educate people, just let them know that can be a problem. I think we've covered that. I think we will continue to cover that and just raise people's awareness as holidays approach. People don't think about it. They're just trying to have a good time. That can be hazardous for some folks. And let people know that we actually have noise ordinances in place. And then the real challenge is actually enforcing it. And that's something that we've spent a lot of time talking about, and we've talked with different people on the council, and that's still a struggle. It's hard to find ways to enforce, and then it's maybe a little hard to get people to actually do it when they have a way to enforce. They're still not ticketing, so that's a challenge. But mostly, we just are hoping that people can try to be good neighbors and not terrorize their neighboring horses if they can help it. And then we cover just different issues as they pop up. Like, for instance, the helicopters recently that were trimming trees with the giant saws. It was actually kind of amazing and fascinating to see. They were right by my farm and flying over my arena. As interesting as it was, maybe some communication efforts in advance would have been super important, because it's really super dangerous. You just can't have saws flying over with no advance. And I think that's been addressed, but that's the kind of thing. And the city, I think, to the best of their ability, was reactive. It's my understanding, city didn't know that was going to happen either. And there was some kind of hostility in the community, thinking that was the city, or that the city knew. City didn't know, as far as I know. And
We don't own a helicopter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Not yet, anyway. So, anyway, that's the sort of thing but we did have people that we know and farm owners that we were able to engage with, and say, hey, we're trying to find out what's going on. That kind of thing. Hot air balloons have been an issue lately too. There's always some beautiful hot air balloons. They're lovely to see from a distance. They're not as lovely if they're flying low with their flamethrowers over your horses. Horses react very negatively to that, with that whole flight animal thing. So there have been a few things that have come up like that, and those are ongoing issues. Another thing that we're interested in and working towards is encouraging agribusiness, and that hobby farmer that wants to engage in different agribusiness activities. That's definitely something that we are trying to connect with those people and learn what those people want to do and how we can help them. So I guess that's not necessarily literally equestrian, but we'd like to think about and learn about all of the agribusiness ventures that are going on in the area. So I think that's pretty much what we've been working on lately. I believe that's, yeah. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
Any questions for Susan? Keep on going. We're good.
All right. Thank you.
Susan Day coming up?
You want to come up? Yeah,
Don't let Tony steal your thunder.
I know. You want to come up?
I'm
You
just
do the last
messing
slide.
around.
Anyway. So, you know, in the spirit of efficiency, you know, just, I guess to wrap up, you know, what do we need from city council? How can we be really a value added committee in our city and really help us grow this equestrian message, this brand, this overall heritage that we're all so proud of? You know, we have had some great conversations and collaboration with different, you know, city functions, Parks and Rec and Public Works. We've had wonderful meetings with them. They've spent the time to take us out to look at the different properties around town, and they all seem very engaged. And so for that, we're super, super thankful. But any of those conversations that we can have, anytime we can be at the table to start, you know, talk strategy on how to best utilize our green spaces, you know, anytime, you know, they need us to come out and actually walk a piece of property to look at ways to create equestrian amenities. I would love to see every single green space in the city of Milton have an equestrian component. So if that's an easy request, I'll just go ahead and throw that one out there, and let's just put trails everywhere. And then let's figure out a way to connect all the parks with the trail plan, and be able to get on a horse at my house and ride all the way to Birmingham Park. I think that would just be a simple request that we would be very grateful for. So there are tons of priorities, obviously. The bicyclists are just as passionate as the horse people, right? I get that. The people that have kids that want to play lacrosse, they want lacrosse fields, just like we want horse trails. But there's a horse on the logo. I mean, that really is all that we really need to say, is that this city was founded on rural heritage. And I think we just need the funds to do some of these projects, and we just need council support. So we are very grateful for the opportunity to be here. So if there are any questions or comments, we would appreciate your feedback, and thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for everything.
Yep, appreciate it.
Councilmember Jacobus and Moore.
Yeah, Tony, I would ask that you hold our feet to the fire.
Okay.
I think there's an awful lot to be gained by a stronger equestrian committee. I'm not a horse person, know very little about them, but I do know that most of them want large lots. And to me, that's what's a real lifesaver for the bond between the two of us, is that I want large lots and you want a place for them.
Right.
And I think you need to hold our feet to the fire as far as funding certain things and helping out where it can be. Because if word gets out that we've got this great park where you can take your horse, maybe somebody's going to move here, and for that reason. So a lot of the advertising may be good, but doing things that people can see, I think will make an even bigger difference. So I think you just need to keep our feet to fire, come back and see us again in the not too distant future.
Rick and Andrea.
I appreciate that very much.
Yep. Tony, I just had a real quick comment, and I know Susan brought it up, and I think Julie brought it up, the tour of barns. I think that would be an amazing event for our city, and I don't think not only Milton would join that, I think we could get folks from Roswell and Alpharetta to join in that. That would be an amazing event if we could pull it off and help pull it off, and bring in some education during that tour. So when people are touring the farms, they are also getting educated on safety and noise, fireworks, like things like that. We can pull all of that into the tour as well.
Well, I agree.
I'd love to see that happen.
Well, and how many times, do you know people that are not horse people or farm owners or equestrians? They drive past these long driveways and they don't necessarily know what it looks like when you get up close. So if there's an opportunity to get non-horse people to come tour barns and meet the folks, especially people with small kids. I mean, that's the next crop of lesson kids, right? I mean, those are the ones that we need to be recruiting, because those are the ones that are going to generate the revenue.
Yeah, I think there would be so much interest with so many families that have moved in over the last few years. I
Yeah.
know my youngest daughter is 7. She is always asking me to go can we go pet a horse anytime? Like she just wants to
Well, the
go.
invite's there. Feed them all you want.
So I think we would have a huge crowd for that, and it could be an amazing fundraiser as well.
Well, thank you. We
Mhm.
appreciate the encouragement on that. You know, it's concerning how many lots or how many farms we're losing. I mean, they're disappearing. I mean, I hate to know in the last 5 years how many farms have disappeared in Milton. You know, and relatively speaking, you know, my family and I, we're fairly new to Milton. We've only been here for 5 years. And so I've seen it. There are days I wonder if we're going to be the last farm in town. And, you know, I guess from a land value perspective, that'd be probably okay. But to live here and enjoy it, we need to save our farms. And if there's anything we can do as a committee to support the initiative set forth by the city, we're prepared to do that. So thank you all very much.
Mhm.
Thanks, Tony.
Yep,
Appreciate
thank you.
it. Do you want, Rick, you have something?
It's more of a question, I guess, towards Ken. A couple meetings ago, we talked about, Bob had brought forward, you know, the tree ordinance variants where someone's going to create pasture or whatever, and we didn't want to do clear cutting. We were going to check with the state to see what we could do to do buffers for existing farms, or could we put that into our ordinance? Because we had the one instance that we talked about was clear cut right up to the edge of the farm next door, next to their barn. So do we have any update on that, or what do we need to do to move that forward?
I don't have any update on it, Councilmember Morag, so I remember the discussion specifically. I just don't know that we've had any additional discussion at the staff level, at least that I've been involved in.
Would that be something we'd have to kind of initiate through community development, Steve, or through our arborist?
They're already working on it.
Okay.
And I know Bob and his team are looking at it from that last meeting, and that's on our, that's part of the work they're doing right now.
And they may have engaged some of my staff, so I just want to mention that if they
It's being looked at under our agricultural exemptions, because that's where this comes into play. And right now we are trying to determine exactly what is exempt as it pertains to tree removal.
Okay.
And whether it's part of the property, the whole property, and that's the work that Bob's team is currently doing with our legal team.
All right. I appreciate it, Tony. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I'll see you March 26th if it's on the 26th. Okay. Thanks. Do we have any public comment?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay. You please call the next item.
Thank you. That next item is discussion of Milton's version of the National Community Survey. Our Communications Director, Mr. Greg Botello.
Hi, all. First off, I want to wish you a happy Valentine's Day. I got 4 daughters and a wife waiting for me, so I will try not to waste your time, but I have some hands-on activities that will make this hopefully more entertaining and fun and fairly efficient. So, first off, I want to just kind of set what I'm trying to accomplish here. The part of it here, I'm going to do a little bit of talking at the beginning just to set the time to kind of set the framework for this. But the goal is that for your help, because this is kind of a valuable survey that it's an anonymous and things like that, but that has a lot of kind of value to the city. And I wanted your ideas of what specific topics that we have control over that you'd like to address with the survey. So, and we're going to have a little exercise at the end. I'm not sure if everyone has pens. I hope you do. Just to give you a little clue. But just stay tuned for that. But the idea is that we have, say, a list of 10 things that we could ask for. We can only ask for 5. We wanted to help us narrow it down, kind of these unique topics that we can ask for. I did send out to you all previously the standardized survey, and we'll talk about that more later. But first off, I want to have some broad overview of what is the National Community Survey. So this is conducted every 2 years, and you gather information from it indicating how Milton residents feel about our city and our government. So there's a few kind of pluses for this. One, it's statistically significant. What does that mean? So that means it's a lot better representative of an entire community's views than like an unweighted, unscientific online survey. So things like we're going to divide people up so not everyone's from the same part of Milton. It's going to be different from different parts of Milton. They'll be weighted for that, or gender or age and that sort of thing. So it'll be kind of representative of everything, which is different than an online survey, which anyone can fill out. And you don't necessarily know that, even though we've had some good responses, but this has definite advantages that way. And another plus is that we compare ourselves against hundreds of cities nationwide. So when we say we have one of the best quality of lives in the country, this is where you can actually say that with some merit, because if you're comparing against hundreds of other cities, and hopefully our citizens love us more than other places in other cities, knock on wood. We can also compare ourselves to how Milton has rated in the past, which is another plus. So if we're doing better in some things, we're doing worse, that's all useful information. It's a whole wide range of topics. So basically anything to do with city government, it's going to touch on. Most of those things are kind of handled no matter what, and that's in that common standard survey. But we also have the ability to ask a handful of unique tailored questions, which is, again, what the end of this kind of presentation is all about. So I talked a little bit about this, but one of the main reasons that this is valuable to us is our strategic plan and kind of its partner, the comprehensive plan. This is a really critical tool to this survey to assess how we're doing. And there's certain specific things that we have actually written in. National Community Survey results will inform how we're doing on, say, satisfaction with trails or parks or public safety. So that's really helpful in a broad sense, in a specific sense in some things. And also generally, what are we doing well? What can we do better? What are the biggest challenges we're facing? So what type of policies that might affect what kind of policies we kind of go forward? What amenities, services, facilities, parks, what are we lacking or what do people want more of? This survey can help with that. And what types of initiatives are worth exploring for, next steps, whether it's a referendum, whether it's a collaborative effort, a work program, a study, all this sort of things. So generally in a broad big picture sense can help us determine where we invest our time and resources, which I know is important to you all. So I'm hopefully if you all received the survey, the email I sent out before, the standard survey. This is about a 6-page survey. So the 5 pages are these standard questions that all different citizens from all around the country get to ask the same questions, except they don't have the word Milton in them. That's something we can change out. So, but the idea that there's kind of you may have seen it before, but I won't go too deeply into it. But questions about Milton as a place to live, how would you rate it, or how safe do people feel? And then we can talk about. They talk about downtowns. We have or commercial areas. How whether people feel welcome here. The vibrancy of commercial areas, traffic flow enforcement. Lots of things about traffic, walking trails and paths. Those are all in there. Community support for the arts is in there. There's several questions, big picture questions on planning. Again, the thing about this is that it has to be something that Joe citizen who knows nothing about what a ComDev is or a zoning is, so they actually understand it. That'll help. So that's one of my jobs, and also these polling experts, to make it so it actually makes sense for people who don't know what a bond is, for example. And the overall direction we're taking in confidence in city government. So in addition to, we have one opportunity for an open-ended question. I don't want to go into just the specific of it because it's wordsmithing. It could take years because every word is a matter of things. But the idea that we do have we don't want to just ask like a question that's like, do you think Milton's cool? It's got to be something that we actually can use. So they yes, it is cool. Great. That's nice to know. But the idea, so one thing that we're, after kind of talks with internal staff and also other people, that we're trying to say the things we're kind of pointing to, that the bullet points are, okay, if we had one, we could add one new service or facility, whether building a park or something like that, or amenity that we don't provide now. What would you pick, and tell us why? And why would it be addressing a challenge or remedy a shortfall? So the idea that this was kind of hopefully get to some people. And if there's some consensus around this, I'd say it's like 75% of things that the one thing I really want is a recycling center. Well, that's really helpful to know. If it's like 20%, everything is different, then that's helpful too. So, that's that. But now this is where it kind of gets fun. We have a half page. What does the half page mean? So half page means that however many questions you can fit on a half page, that could be anywhere from 3 to 7, depending on how the wording. If you say, do you like the color blue? That's a short question. Do you think the color, you see Babylon for paragraphs on it, you can basically, have fewer questions depending on how many words. So a few things here. They have to be ratings or multiple choice. They can't be open-ended. There's no fill in the blank option. And we have to touch on things you can't ask in the standard survey. So I want something we're looking for something that are Milton specific. So, and as mentioned, the good thing is our strategic plan. I mentioned that there's about 5 or 6 places that I mentioned for the community survey. Thankfully, all of them are covered by the standard survey, as I call it, except for one, which is about people's satisfaction with our website. So unfortunately, we are stuck with that. So that will be included, but we still have 4 or 5 left that we can actually kind of work through. So the question tonight, and I'm going to actually give you, Stacy, you ready? Does everyone have a pen? Okay, good times. So
There should be all pens all up there.
I will explain this, but this is your rank. 1 through 8.
Yeah, I feel like I'm my kid now.
Stacy's been great.
Can I have 5? Can I have 2 or 3?
2 or 3.
No cheating.
Crayons.
You can't cheat. I'm sure you would. So, not my council members, maybe other council members. So the idea, so these are based off of input from council. I'd asked for some input from city staff, and also just general conversations surrounding the comprehensive plan, strategic plan. So a lot of these topics came up again and again. So if you could prioritize, okay, the number 1 is, I think we should ask that one first. Number 2, I should ask that second. Number 8 is like, I really don't care. And the idea is that we have a limited number. So this is kind of a tool for us. So the idea that we're going to do our best that can based off of that. So maybe I'll have this. We need Jeopardy music at this point to fill that out. So
Can we suggest like wording changes maybe?
Yes.
I mean, the like.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, yeah.
just
So I can actually explain.
Like the increased taxes.
Yes.
Like,
So can I
I
explain
thought
that one?
bond might. I don't know.
Yes. So my apologies that I'm actually doing this off of my phone because it's easier. Yes. So increase. So the reason, for example, that's a good example where I talked to the polling expert. If you say, do you support a bond for more active parks or passive parks? Joe citizen may not know what a bond is.
Fair enough.
Joe citizen may not know what a passive park is. But if you say for active parks, like for more courts, trails, and things like that. So the idea is that you're trying to reach as most people. And unfortunately, yes.
No, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so that's why I put it in quotes, because that's what it means. Unfortunately, you don't have you want to basically reach as many people that make sense. So, yeah. And then the alcohol question is a good one, but that one was derived from a council member about alcohol. So it might be I talked to Bernadette Harville, and she had some good ideas about how to word that, but I think that is certainly pressing. And our goal is to send this out in the next few weeks, and then we'll get the results hopefully back by middle of spring. So, or maybe hopefully earlier. So.
Do we have to put our name on it?
Stacy has the power. That's fine. It's anonymous, of course. So. We bat around a few ideas how to do this, but we figured this is the most, I don't know, fair versus whoever yells loudest.
Pick up the pace there.
Carol lost her shot.
And also just one thing, so we mentioned equestrian, like that is an example of a good thing we'd like to know, but you wouldn't necessarily, it's anonymous. You wouldn't know where they were. You would know generally what parts of it are. You could ask 0, 1 to 3, things like that. You wouldn't exactly have a complete census, but there's a lot of other uses for this kind of survey too. So. No pressure, Stacy.
Want us to put in the phone so we do real live?
What's that?
So I was joking. If we do like real live update and then.
We should, yes, we should, yeah. We should, and then we have a winner sort of thing. We'll be like one of those horse races who wins.
This was actually a subject of debate during our mock meeting. This was the final outcome.
Any other? Are you done?
No, so basically, I don't have any. If you have any questions for me, the thing is the challenge. I didn't bring up the specific wording because again, it could be pretty tedious. And the thing about this is that no matter what word you put, people are going to interpret it in a different way. And this is not like yeah, exactly. But still, I think it can be very informative. So But Stacy will have the mic whenever she's she's going to announce the winners or at least the top whatever.
Second, the sword.
And to be honest, this is something we're going to take into account, and we're going to basically try to squeeze as many questions. We'll work with city staff as we can based off of these priorities. So,
Greg, do we have numbers the last time we did a community survey? How many people participated?
well, so what it is I think it's about. So there's two different types. So there's one is it's a representative survey, so it's like a polling. You think of a political poll. So I think I want to say it's like 5 or 6%. They have or maybe it's more like 5 to 10% because they send it out to 10% of people and hopefully get people. Milton's had a historically a high response rate. So the thing is that within the margin of errors, I think are like around 5%. That helps. That's the key. These people are experts for a reason, but if the margin of error key, so the more people respond, the margin of error goes down. So
They could actually tell us how many people respond to the survey, and then from there you can determine the representative sample, how it compares to population.
Yes, exactly. So, and then in addition, there's going to be an unscientific online survey that we basically put it up that anyone can do, but those are more for everyone can participate, and it's valuable, but it's not representative. So,
okay.
And Greg, they keep going until they hit their minimum threshold
Yes.
for that statistically.
Apparently, historically, that has not been a problem with Milton, thankfully. But yes, and then the idea too, the minimal threshold is again to have as many people, people represent on the east side of town as the north side of town as the west side of town, that sort of thing. So that's part of it.
All right, you ready for the results? Okay, the first, I'll just rank them from top priority on down. Citizens' priorities for parks, recreation, cultural spending is number 1. Underneath that is increased taxes to fund more active and passive parks. That's number 2. Recycling and other waste management options, number 3. Future of Deerfield, Bethany, Highway 9 areas, 4. Allowing businesses with 50% of revenue from alcohol sales. And then underneath that is adding more commercial to alleviate residents' property taxes. Value of community policing. And the last is future of the Arnold Mill corridor.
There we go.
Everybody good with those?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. I should have done my next slide. I have more pictures of the horses. So I'm all good. I'm always an open book. If you guys need anything from me anytime, you know where to reach me. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any public comment?
We do not, Mayor.
All right. Let's call the next agenda item, please.
Mayor, that next item is discussion of council-issued use permits for alcohol-related businesses. We do have our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Bernadette Harville, available to us via Zoom tonight. And Robin's
evening.
going to help with the presentation. Bernadette, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me, Tammy?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, as the City Clerk mentioned, we'll be discussing content related to council-issued use permits for alcohol-related businesses. Robin and I will be gathering feedback tonight that we will incorporate into the proposed text amendments to Chapter 64. If we can proceed to the agenda slide, that would be great. Perfect. On tonight's agenda, we will go over some background information. We'll look at the timeline for the process to amend Chapter 64. We will then go over specific development standards and get council's feedback on each topic area, including use permit denial or rescinding provisions, potential distinctions within Milton's current commercial nodes, days and hours desired for authorized consumption on premises in such establishments, whether council would like to include language prohibiting certain sales and activities in such businesses, potential floor space dedication requirements, delivery hours, signage, and a few other items to consider. And finally, we will answer any remaining questions you may have and gather any additional feedback that will help Robin and I ensure we capture council's vision in the upcoming text amendments. And we can go to the next slide. We have been discussing alcohol licensing and permitting for some time now, but this topic, this specific presentation has come about as a direct result of the joint work session between the Planning Commission and City Council that took place last December. In that meeting, staff was given direction to prepare the necessary text amendments to Chapter 64 that will set up the requirement for businesses wishing to have consumption on premises and do not meet the qualifications for a restaurant or an eating establishment to obtain a council-issued use permit prior to being able to apply for their alcohol license related to consumption on premises. Again, obtaining this new use permit would be the first step in a multi-step process to be able to serve alcohol on site. To remind those that may not have been party to that conversation, the council-issued use permit was determined to be the best tool to allow for maximum transparency and time to review some of the more unique business concepts the city is seeing in this economy. Council will be able to tailor conditions to best suit the city, and as always, applicants will be able to apply for concurrent variances when desired. We can move to the next slide. Tonight, we are here on the first section. It's the first of 2 city council work sessions that will allow staff to gain input on the front end of the process. On March 22nd, staff will present the text amendments at the community zoning information meeting. At the end of April, those amendments with any feedback from the CZIM will be presented to the Planning Commission. We will regroup with council and share the feedback from those 2 meetings at the May 9th work session, followed by the first presentation on May 16th and consideration for approval on the zoning agenda on June 6th, 2022. Any related Chapter 4 amendments and potential extensions to the existing moratorium will be before you as well. Next, we will move into the specific development standards to gain council's feedback. I can stop here to address any questions you may have up to this point before we move on.
Nope.
Excellent. Okay. I'm glad you could still hear me and I'm not just droning on to myself. We can go to the next slide. Okay. Milton is taking a unique approach to this subject matter through the combination of zoning requirements and alcohol licensing. A major consideration when issuing use permits is the ability to protect the city's vision while being upfront with the property owners regarding their zoning rights. In order to do so, council may want to consider incorporating language that would clarify when a use permit may be outright denied or when an existing use permit may be rescinded. The first topic that staff would like to discuss is distance. The current distance requirements in Chapter 4 would not apply to such consumption on premises establishments proximity to each other. So we were just looking to get some feedback from council on whether or not they would like to have some distance guidelines regarding consumption on premise in relation to churches, schools, and other businesses that do the same type of activity.
Bernadette, are we talking about restaurants or are we talking about everything else that's under the moratorium?
It would be the everything else under that moratorium currently. We can talk about other distance requirements if you'd like to include them, but tonight we're just looking to get feedback on those businesses under the moratorium that would need use permits moving forward.
All right, thank you.
So for example, state law and Milton's law requires package stores to be within a certain distance of churches or school buildings. It does not have those same requirements for consumption on premise, nor do we currently have any requirements for them to be within a certain distance of each other. So just want to get a little bit of council feedback to see if that's something they were interested in trying to incorporate in these use permit conditions.
Anybody?
The big looming question for me is, do we have a reasonable list of those kinds of businesses that we're being asked to consider these additional measures of? Because there may be some consumption on premise that we find inappropriate for Milton. I'm not looking for ways to make it easier for those businesses to come here. I want to make sure that we have, tight parameters on those things that are going to be Milton appropriate. So I don't know if it's premature to discuss a distance from what it is until I have a better feel for what are the kinds of things either we've had applications for that we are currently under moratorium on. There's maybe a backlog that we should probably have a higher familiarity with about what those concepts are, or are there concepts that are trending in other areas that we should be offered for consideration as well, and then measure things like distance and appropriateness. And
I mean, and I also think it's a use permit, so we have the authority to say yes or no, giving whichever one we want to go with. So I think the flexibility of that, I think, is good, that as long as we have the use permit, but I'm welcome to council feedback.
I think it's fair to say that what you're being presented with is
Right. I personally would just say no, because we have the use permit.
Yeah, I don't think we want to stifle business ideas and new concepts coming to Milton. And I don't want to, from a commercial aspect, don't want to put us at a competitive disadvantage as a city that's trying to be welcoming and provide a high quality of life here, both to the citizens who live here, as well as the businesses that have invested in our community. So to your point, Mayor, that because it's a use permit, we can say no to any of those. But are we looking at measures that are enticing or not enticing? You know,
I still like the ability that we have to actually review it, because it's kind of hard to, at least for me personally, to say, well, let's do this number of feet, because until I see what's been developed or what could be developed, the specifics I think are important, especially that's what we've struggled with as a council with some of the other licenses and different uses. So, and I don't know if I think it's similar to what you're saying, Paul. It's hard to make a decision, Bernadette, at least for me, to recommend a certain distance and say, well, this is what we need to do. Here's the restrictions. And I also understand you want to be able to work with the customer, with the business. We don't want to have them go down a whole list, get too far in the process and then be told, oh, sorry, we've changed our mind. That's where I think it's important to kind of flesh it out a little bit more.
I'll give you an example where I struggle with the distances at the moment. And that is, I think we have given consideration to like nail salons or beauty salons that may have wanted to offer a glass of wine for consumption on site. So is that one of the things that would be considered under this measure? That would not be.
Currently, we were not including those types of incidental service license holders. This would be, for example, if you think of the limited tap establishments, the craft beer and wine markets, the breweries, distilleries, things like that, that would be having consumption on site for sale. We were just asking basically if there was any kind of maybe distance between those establishments you'd like to set as maybe the standard in the development, that they could ask for a concurrent variance should they want to open next to another one that you could consider. But maybe at least if you were interested to have any of those distances embedded in the code so they understood they couldn't be potentially lining up next to each other.
I think part of sometimes having multiple services of similar nature close to each other allows for choice. Until you really understand what that business is, you don't know whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. So I think personally, I'd like us to stay away from the distance.
I think there's some value to that. I think that there are certainly appropriate distance measures when it comes to schools, daycares, churches, those kinds of things. But when it comes to what the market is, here's the delicate balance that I struggle with at the moment without thinking about it a lot more, is a certain part of me says we shouldn't determine what the market will bear. If two businesses want to go side by side, the market will determine whether one or the other or both survives. And yet, I don't necessarily want to create an environment where you can do a bar crawl. You can go from one to the next to the next to the next within a block. So that's my internal struggle at the moment about what does that look like.
But again, I guess the use permit, so a bar coming in, I mean, not a bar.
But the problem would be if you can't be arbitrary. Maybe that's a question for legal. Can you be arbitrary? Can we say yes to some because we like the concept and they can be side to side? And the next time we say, well, you've got a similar business, but it's too close, so now we're going to have three.
representing this council a long time. Councilman Moore, I've never seen this council.
Yeah.
That was supposed to generate a little more laughter. All right, well, in any event, no, we cannot be arbitrary, but a use permit does give us a great deal of discretion. I think that is something that we could maybe even put as an element for consideration, proximity to a similar business, not determinative, but certainly a functional element to take in mind for the very purpose. But and again, y'all are the policymakers, but I like the flexibility of the use permit. Assess everyone. And I will tell you just one more thing, if you don't mind, and that is that particularly in the realm of alcohol right now, the new business models and paradigms that are coming to us in just rapid succession, the more flexibility you give yourself to try on, but not buy, but try on new ideas, I think that's.
But part of the execution for me is if you embrace something on the front end and you discover that it's problematic, what is our legal course that isn't going to cost the city a fortune to say a year from now, you know what, your alcohol license isn't something, whatever permit you have is not something that's attractive to us, and we can take it away without tremendous legal.
That is complicated, particularly, if it's an established business. Obviously, had this discussion before, zoning versus alcohol. Within the alcohol context, you all have the ability to change the rules year to year. So a new license can be imposed. Very clear, there's no unilateral expectation to always getting that permit reissued just the way you like it. Councils have the ability to change their mind and shore up things. Now, can you put somebody out of business that spent a fortune investing in that area? That's a different issue.
Yeah, and maybe that success that actually is the burden to the community. If it's a very popular place that is either, too noisy, too bright, too much traffic, too this, too that, we have a high incident of police response required. That success could be our biggest hurdle.
But if we don't try some things, we're not going to know. With the demand, every city's trying to get we want one that's a little level above it.
And the community historically has been very outspoken about no bars. That's pretty black and white and has been for a long, long time. But I don't know that we're saying no to interesting concepts that may be a spinoff of that. When you talk about limited taps or distilleries or some of the things that are certainly concepts that didn't exist 5 years ago.
No, I mean, we're sitting here tonight because it was by right, and we learned our lesson. And the use permit, I think, grants us exactly everything that I think it's exactly what we want. So
I agree.
We good on that topic? Or?
Well, I guess the question is back to Bernadette. Have we answered, have we given her enough information to work with?
Just to confirm, so we're going to omit any distance requirements from the current text amendments, and maybe we need to look at them at another time. Should that become a concern down the road?
Yes, but I will say to Ken's point of having proximity as part of the application, or so it gives us an out maybe if something does come along the way that we don't like. Robin?
Robin's raised her hand.
Yeah.
Just being funny. Okay. So I think on my next presentation, I'll give a good example there's about 10 use considerations, and that's definitely a subject that can be analyzed where you don't have to have an exact, number of feet or number of miles away from it. So it'll become clear to you when we go to the next presentation, kind of give you a little flavor of it. So
Perfect. Rick?
So we have state restrictions as it pertains to alcohol, but we have the ability to be more restrictive when it talks about distance to schools or churches or whatever, or other businesses, but that's within our purview. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd like to compliment our city attorney and attempt at legal humor, which we know is so difficult. We applaud your effort to put
Very
it out there for
difficult.
consideration.
Manager to have a trap set where he could, but be hanging. Got nothing.
So we currently do not have any distance requirements for these types of businesses. from schools or churches or daycares. We could always look at that again when we do chapter 4, or we can embed it in the use permit development standards.
I think it would be good to actually know if someone's bringing an application, at least for council to know, are there any schools and maybe we can work on what those things we'd like to see, but let us know really what's out there when we're considering it.
Can't you just ask that question in the application
That's
process? We don't have to state why what our consideration parameters are, other than for the sake of knowing. Just make sure it's a question that we're asking.
I think when staff presents the use permit, maybe that's some of the, we've talked about actually seeing in some of these type of establishments, seeing the floor plan so we can get an idea of, okay, how are you set up? So that's part of, I think, what we wanted to see. And maybe also, maybe we can talk about what it is what were the other things that we want to actually have to educate council when we're trying to make a decision, like proximity to a school or a church or whatever. I mean, the state law would restrict some things outright, so it'd be a non-starter, but where that doesn't occur, and maybe that's the example we're going to be looking at, what do we want to see? What type of information would we like to see to actually make a good decision?
I've done a little bit of research in nearby cities. Some of them do still have consumption on premises limits from schools and churches. Some of them do still have distances between package stores. Some of the things we currently do not have in our ordinance. It's kind of give or take from each jurisdiction what was the way they handled it.
And Bernadette, with package stores, do we, by right, allow them today to, once they're approved, they can actually have consumption on premises, like sampling, that type of thing? Did we change that when we did some of these revisions, or is that still in the ordinance that if you get approved for package store, you can do sampling, you can do tasting, you can do that type of thing? Because we talked about that when that came up. It was a new concept, and we were a little bit concerned. At least I was a little concerned initially because I'd never seen that or understood the need for it.
Again, the tasting is separate from what tonight we're talking about for sale.
Okay.
Consumption premise, but the tastings are still allowed, and they are governed by our law and state law with those restrictions to how much can be tasted in a given time and how often.
So in package stores, that still is an opening right now that they actually can do it. But as far as sales for consumption on premises, like, I know we're not talking about craft beer establishment, but if we have under this new category, that's where I'd like to see a little bit more what falls, or what type of licenses or applications are we actually seeing come before us?
So typically what we're seeing right now are places that would like to have beer and or wine for package sales in addition to having consumption on premises.
Okay.
That's kind of the concept model we're seeing, and they may have other things going on as well. As I mentioned, we had one business that was strictly just a package store and had the consumption on premise, and they have recently closed. So now the ones that we have remaining also have other types of retail sales, such as groceries or food prepared on site, but not enough to qualify as a restaurant.
So Bernadette, just if you could remind me, I know there was a pretty spirited discussion at one point about the removal of distilled spirits from tasting. And at that point in time, that package store did still exist. So if with that one now gone, there are no other examples that would potentially be a candidate for on-site consumption, like tasting of hard spirits, correct?
No, that's still allowed, and actually we do have a business that has that. I think we're starting to mix a lot of the concepts. Tastings are allowed in package stores. It's the for sale consumption on site business that was only a package store that is now closed, but the package store that has tastings is still open.
Okay. Is one of the things we were considering still on the table, taking away the distilled spirits tasting?
Tonight, we're not we're not planning on discussing chapter 4 at this time. Right now, we were just
Okay.
trying to get the guidance for Robin's team
Okay.
to be able to actually construct the conditions for the use permit, but I'd be happy to bring that up again as we get closer to the chapter 4 revisions that tie back into this piece.
All right. I'd just like to note for the record that that's still a concern for me personally.
Absolutely. I will make a note of that.
Thank you.
If we could, let me just get back to you to confirm that, because my recollection is the same as yours. And let me just pull through that a little bit and make sure if I recall removing distilled spirits from the
Thought so
tasting.
too. Yeah, thank you.
But that store can still have tasting. Is that what we're talking about? I might be confusing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to get off track. So let's
Yeah.
let's go to your next thing.
I will be
Thank you.
happy to bring back all of those. I know we cleaned it up. I just I'll bring that back to you. But so as far as distances, just to close this section, is it safe to say that we can add any distance requirements into chapter 4 when we move back to that chapter and leave them out of the zoning standards?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. The other content we would like to talk about is the ability for council to consider, can you go back one slide,
Okay,
please?
sorry.
Thank you. Inactivity, if you'd like to rescind use permits based on inactivity. So for example, if you have a business in a certain suite within a building that has a use permit, and then that business for any reason goes out of business and another non-alcohol related business comes into play, would that use permit stay dormant or would it be rescinded?
Yeah, I think we're all in rescinded.
Okay, excellent. We can move on to the next slide. All right. As you know, as you go through Milton, many of the different commercial nodes have distinct character features. And we just wanted to talk about if council would like to keep these distinctions within these use permits and only allow them within certain commercial nodes, or will this be uniform across all commercial districts?
So I can kind of expand on that. So right now we have Deerfield and Crabapple form-based code, and it has a use table and it talks about certain alcohol-related uses versus, let's call the main commercial node, non-form-based code would be Birmingham Crossroads. And so that's dictated by our more traditional zoning. So I think that if you want to be consistent overall, then we'll need to make accommodations, not just in the form-based code, but also in outlining the use permits to be required in, let's say, the C1 or the MIX zoning districts that exist right now. So
Is there a benefit to the city to make a difference there versus making it same across the board?
I mean, I can address Birmingham Crossroads. Our intention from the very beginning is always to make it a little bit different, that it's a smaller, home-based, independent, one-off restaurant and family services kind of crossroads business site. So I personally would like us to see that through, where that level of constraint still stays.
So how would you change that?
Well, it doesn't exist today for it. It's other than larger commercial nodes, correct? Crabapple, Deerfield.
right, so Crabapple and Deerfield are under the form-based code versus, like I said, the Birmingham Crossroads. We could either do it through the overlay district, or we could, let's say if there are certain use permits that you want to be permitted in the form-based codes, then that'll be, required zoning districts. It'd be T3, whatever it is, a transect zone. If you don't want those uses to be in the crossroads, I could see that you would do another, you would exclude, let's say, C1 or MIX. So there's all different ways. There's a couple different ways we can handle it if that's the prerogative of the council to have kind of a different type of feel or allow certain businesses in the form-based code, but maybe not in the overlay the Birmingham Crossroads.
Yeah, so there are paths to accommodate that.
Do y'all have any opinion on that? So basically, if we want to keep it within Crabapple and Deerfield in our dense areas, if we move forward and we don't allow it in Birmingham, pretty much there would be no use permit for anything other than, I mean, you could just do a 50% restaurant, correct?
Correct. So I'll just give you an example. I got a little scared because I was looking at what was at Birmingham, Birmingham Crossroads. So currently, back in 2013, 2014, we did a fairly big revision on excluded uses. And one of the items that we did was prior to 2013, 14, I can't remember the exact year, a liquor selling package store was permitted in C1. But in 2013, 14, we changed it so it's only permitted in C2. So, but there, there's a package store right next to the gas station. Well, that was allowed prior to that change of the ordinance. So right now, package stores are not permitted in MIX or C1. So right now it's pretty much steady up there. So that's just an example of how it is kind of apples to oranges versus the form-based code. And then obviously that's pretty much all the area. We have no C2 that exists in the city. So from the traditional zoning.
So this would be the consideration of those establishments that aren't qualifying as restaurants. So that would also include breweries, microbreweries, limited tap style places, those craft beer, wine makers, any general retail that wants to also have consumption on premise. Would you guys like to see it in all the different districts?
Council, you all have any opinion other than Councilmember Moore? Because I don't have a strong opinion either way because of the use permit does protect it, but I do know the history of Birmingham, what Councilmember Moore is saying, so.
So you look at this, for example, at Birmingham Crossroads, look at the success of 7 Acre. And that's what the community had in mind when we're talking about alcohol consumption at a place like that. You look at the success of Union, which is not supported by any other surrounding businesses. Again, it's a 50-50, it's highly successful. I don't know if it's probably the concept, the quality of the food, the quality of the service, but I don't, again, just to be protective of the Birmingham Crossroads, because I've been invested in that so long, I think I'd like to do my best to ensure that I keep those guards up.
And I guess, Robin, they could always apply could they do a rezoning?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Could they rezone something if some
Yeah, I mean, they
concept
could
came in?
ask for rezoning from C1 to C. That's
Right.
only packaged liquor store. That's all I can address
Mhm.
right now. But again, that's something we can look at. I mean, to be honest, the breweries and breweries who have restaurants, in a lot of ways, they can be very similar to a 50-50 on consumption restaurant. So, that's something to look at. Maybe we could consider breweries, but with certain qualifications of space of the interior. So
Have you had
it's
any?
just a point.
I know we've had a lot of people come to us in Crabapple for a lot of these concepts. How about Birmingham?
So we have had a couple of different groups coming to community development asking about the brewery and our microbrewery up at the Crossroads. So it's definitely been of interest.
Okay.
So when we get a question like that, do we tell them the path, we tell them what our current ordinances will or won't allow, but do we also offer them the information if they choose to come forward and ask for some kind of a variance so they understand the process?
So currently, because I believe of the moratorium,
Good point.
it's not permitted this second, but let's say if there wasn't the moratorium, it's been determined that, they could be permitted in C1 with certain circumstances, so.
Right. Yeah, so there's a path.
So just to clarify, am I hearing that we're okay with considering it to be in the same allowable in C2 and then they could rezone? Is that what we're saying?
And that was the question I had
That would be
was,
a request.
if we don't allow it in Birmingham, would there be any path for someone to come forward with something? And I think the question was, you could rezone the property, which,
Yeah, if we allow it in the first place in one of the districts or one of the zoning in the overlay district, then they could. But if it's only allowed in form-based code, then if I'm not, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, they would not be able to do it in Birmingham Crossroads if it's only allowed under form-based code.
Right, I mean, we could, if it's the council's desire, we could exclude certain uses for the overlay district, so.
I'm just someone to where if you do it right and it's small and it fits the area, then great. But as we've seen, when you do it wrong, it can completely go the other way.
So I think just from a professional planning aspect, I think like the use permit can be a very valuable tool, whether you wanted to use it in Birmingham as well, as where you would have that ability to do restrictions and to look at things as well. That's another option.
I have an idea. Why don't we carry this debate over to the work sessions in our council meeting when we're actually going to vote on it? Because I don't think is that going to be a problem if we do that? Because I would like the public to kind of be involved in that.
Yeah, so we're also going to have the CZIM meeting for proposed text amendments. We'll have another work session after the planning commission with these text amendments. So I think there'll be multiple opportunities.
So is that okay if there's just no decision on that one right now?
Yeah. Just offer one more thought for consideration. I'm sorry.
You spoke first.
I didn't necessarily wasn't recognized, but if we look at the opportunity for success in crabapple and the fact that we know that we've got there's some big upside opportunity for Deerfield, I would also say I don't feel badly in my continued guarding of Birmingham Crossroads for the sake of encouragement of those businesses, creating a higher density or a vitality in those areas that we are considering a higher use of that kind of commercial entity. So it's almost like I'm trying to, in my saying no for Birmingham, I'm endorsing the vitality that could come from that business being forced to Crabapple or Deerfield. Food for thought.
Right.
Yeah, Bernadette, where was the package store that no longer exists that had that license?
In Crabapple, we had one package store, and they're no longer in business, that had the consumption on premise for the craft beer and wine market. And just to clarify before we move on, in case I gave any information that confused anybody, the liquor tastings are restricted to distilleries and micro distilleries based on your last round of edits, as the city manager mentioned. So while the package store on Highway 9 in the Deerfield area sells liquor, they can't do tastings of their liquor.
They cannot.
Correct.
Yeah, that's how I remember it.
Yep. Sorry for any confusion on that.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
And then we have one other package store, the one that has the drive-through that's in Milton, but on the opposite side of the road, close to our borderline by the Kroger on Highway 9.
Robin's going to be pointing out actually all of our package stores later this evening up there, as she has a presentation regarding a warrant.
Okay.
So I'll let her do that with a map, and I'll give you a better visual of where all those are. So for right now, I guess if I understood the mayor correctly, we're going to move forward with allowing the CZIM and Planning Commission to give us their feedback on having it allowed in all of the areas. And then if they give any other feedback, maybe we can restrict it further based on the next meeting.
Yes, that sounds good.
Excellent. Okay, we can move on to the next slide.
Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. No, fire me from my job right now.
I would never fire you, Robin. Okay, so the next consideration we wanted to talk about were days and hours of operation for the consumption on premises piece. Understanding that any business that also has package sales would still be able to operate to the normal package sales hours of business. This is just for the consumption piece. So currently, you can see right here, as we know, eating establishments have those later hours till 2 a.m. the next business day, but any business that does not qualify under that restaurant eating establishment has curtailed hours. Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. is the most common for those limited tap manufacturers, the craft beer and wine markets. And last round of edits, you guys allowed for 11 p.m. on the limited food service restaurants. When we create these use permits, are these still the same hours you'd like to maintain, or do you want to look at some other hours Monday through Saturday for these types of businesses?
Hey, Bernadette, so give me the example of a limited food service restaurant again.
Billy Allen's.
Yeah, okay,
These are one and only right now.
got it.
We've got a moratorium on that use right now, correct? On adding
All of this is
additional-
under a moratorium that you see before you right now.
So what are what are their hours on Sunday?
They cannot operate for alcohol on Sundays by
Okay,
state law and Milton law. So that's not something that we can allow for them even on, if you would like to, sorry.
Yeah, I forgot the brewery is completely separate. That's what I was getting confused on. Okay. How was council think on the hours?
I think these are reasonable.
Yeah, okay. All right, we're good on that.
Excellent. So we'll keep those hours within the basics for the development standards. We can move to the next slide.
Bernadette, just to confirm again, this, for example, where we just suggested we were in support of those hours, will those also be up for consideration in the CZIM and the Planning Commission meetings?
Everything that we put forth in those text amendments will be up for feedback from both of those meetings.
Okay, so we'll get some more input from the community on those too.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
All right, next we have the potential prohibitions. Oh, sorry. If you look here, some of the topics we've talked about when we were working on Chapter 4 was prohibiting certain types of sales within these establishments. Selling distilled spirits, currently it's only permitted in the limited food service restaurants, distilleries, and micro distilleries. We wanted to get a little bit of feedback on whether or not you were still comfortable with allowing the sale of distilled spirits in places that have less than 50-50 ratios. Again, that would not be allowed in the craft beer wine market and limited tap style establishments.
Could you give us an example of a business? Like,
If we were to get another, I'm going to use the term 70-30 just for everyone's, to be easy on everyone's mind, but if we were to get a business that had maybe a 70-30 ratio threshold, would you be comfortable allowing them to have distilled spirit sales in that establishment? That is currently allowed today.
But they could do 70-30 for beer and wine, is that what you're saying?
They can do 70-30, including beer, wine, and distilled spirits. That's the way Mr. Allen's restaurant is set up.
Mr. Allen's restaurant.
And I just wanted to make sure as we do the use permits that we wanted to continue to allow that. And there was no interest in prohibiting distilled spirits in places that don't qualify as a eating establishment.
Well, this one's easy for me because what this is saying, we've already had a pretty significant debate about 70-30. And we've pretty much said, no, thank you. That's why we introduced the moratorium. We've got one exception to that, and that's we're going to tolerate that under the measure that will be available to us in the course of the next period of time. So to suggest that we're going to still include this in some of the stuff, I think is a contradiction in what our efforts would be. So it'd be, in my mind, it would be inconsistent to allow it here when we've talked about limiting 70-30. So my suggestion would be that we not allow that.
I guess I'd offer a little different view because I know I'm not a big proponent of the 70-30. I know that's why we said moratorium, but to say that you couldn't have anything with distilled spirits, you could only have beer and wine, I guess I'd want to see it on a case by case, just like we said, this would be a use permit and then take a look at what we want to allow.
In that scenario, somebody who's
Someone
making an
went out, I guess,
application, they would be up, they'd ask for all three, but you might say only yes to two.
I wouldn't restrict the ability to have a mixed drink if they're a limited food. I don't think we want to just restrict it to beer and wine. I think we want to look at the establishment and say, okay, do we want this type of establishment? And here's what Because even over at like restaurants, you can order all three. I don't know why we would make the exception of saying that you can't have any type of distilled spirit served. If we're going to approve the 70-30, why would I restrict that? I think we're going to actually probably not allow this too often based upon our discussions in the past.
And really, we're going 70-30, but for all we know, the use permit could be person wants to do 55-45 or 60-40. They have a concept and it's something that we haven't thought of and it's fantastic or something, and the community supports. But I understand both, but the use permit really helps all of this.
Yep.
So I would rather see that, because I hate to limit something. We got to go back and change it, but but I see what you're saying, Paul.
Yeah, I'm only one.
Okay.
I'm only one vote on that.
Anybody have feedback on any other council members on that?
I'd like to see us keep it.
Okay. All right, Bernadette, anybody else?
Okay. So currently inside the liquor selling establishments or those off-premise package stores, we have some restrictions for things like lottery, games of chance, tobacco, vape, and CBD products. We were interested in seeing if you'd like to include that kind of language within these use permits.
You're saying prohibit it?
He's asking.
Correct. Yes, sir. Would you be interested in prohibiting that within establishments that have this consumption on premise and don't qualify as an eating establishment?
Okay. I mean, I kind of lean to yes, and Rick was shaking his head, so.
I'm okay leaving that as, I think we've tried to limit this type of thing in Milton in our establishment, so I don't have a problem prohibiting personally.
Okay.
We're saying yes, prohibit.
Yes,
Yes, put
prohibit.
the language in.
Excellent. The last one on this slide is amplified music. We've had this conversation in little pockets, so we were just interested to see if this was something you wanted worked into the development standards for all these use permits, and if so, would you like to prohibit it indoors, outdoors, or both?
Council, before I give my 2 cents.
I think you prohibit outdoors, but I would like to see the opportunity for indoors.
So I think indoors is perfectly fine too. The outdoor, I mean, because, there are restaurants that have acoustic, that are sometimes out there. And again, I think the use permit kind of gives us that.
They could request it. If we said prohibit, they could still request it as a variance too. Is that correct? Or
Right,
did
if in the use permit you prohibit, let's say, all amplified music, they could ask for a concurrent variance.
But if we said we'll allow indoor music, they could request and say, well, we want to have outside music by our seating or whatever. But that's something that they could request as an exception. If we built in there that, no, we don't want outside amplified music, they could still request it.
So what about outside non-amplified music?
Well,
I mean, or whatever.
Right. I mean, because we actually in Crabapple or Deerfield and commercially zoned property, you are allowed to have amplified music outside, correct?
I mean, it's dictated by the noise ordinance, but
So could we restrict them if?
through our warrants, we have, I believe we've restricted some outdoor amplified music, but it was a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I think part of this discussion we had a while ago was, what if you decided that the rooftop of the parking lot was going to be a great outdoor concert venue? I don't know that we want to have that a by right, or I think we need to look at those on a case-by-case basis. To your point, indoor, where you are not likely going to exceed sound level barriers, have a problem with that, because they're going to have to meet the sound ordinance requirements anyway. Outdoor, we should be allowed to take a look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
All right. Bernadette?
Thank you. Oh, we're getting close here. The next one is floor space dedication. So as you know, some of our recent Chapter 4 edits have contained some restrictions or specifications related to floor space for businesses such as this. And we wanted to see if council wanted to include this type of language into the use permits. For your reference, there's a couple of ways you can tackle this. So I gave some examples from the current chapter 4. There are certain times when we restrict where consumption on premise may take place. There's other times where we restrict the percentage of floor space that has to be dedicated to or we require, a specific percentage of floor space to be dedicated to the other retail activity. So just kind of want to get some feedback. I know that 2 of the types currently don't have restrictions. If we were to put them under the use permit, would you like to add restrictions or requirements to those types of businesses?
Anybody want to take a stab at this one?
I would say, yes, I would like to see floor space restrictions, but I'm not prepared to state what the percentages are. At least at this point, without further input from the community or from the community, the business community, or even some of the proprietors that are out there to understand what those limitations might be. What I hate to see happen is we don't put some level of at least have a starting point on it, and you start with 100%. That to me is problematic.
No, I 100% agree. I think that's probably where we'll get when we go through the process. So probably put that with the other one. Everybody okay with that? As far as we'll have some limit. We don't know what that limit is, but we'll see when it goes.
Is there a starting point we'd like to put in when we go to CZIM to have their feedback on?
50-50.
Yeah.
The only reason I say that is I think it would almost change from business type to business type. Some of them, would use just round tabletops, and others are going to get carried away with a bar type area and something else. But I think if you start with 50-50, at least give you a starting point.
Or you start at 0 and they got to pitch the value of the percentage.
Well, I think they were at 40 in one and 60 on the other. So sounds like we're probably at 50-50. So that's a fine starting point. We'll have 3 or 4 public meetings.
It'd probably be best to just hear from some business owners that could really explain the whole situation.
100%. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to leave that to Robin's expertise.
Thanks. Well, I think maybe we could do a little bit of a survey of other, I'm thinking especially breweries, distilleries, micro breweries, maybe do a little survey to find out what is their business model and how much of their space contains restaurant eating versus bar/manufacturing. I think that might help us give you some guidance about which direction to go, so we can try to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Explore some of the concepts that are in the area or like concepts that maybe are not from our city, but might be an example of that. I think about some of the places I've been in Alpharetta. It's an interesting measure of like a microbrewery. The floor space is tables, and you have a choice of just buying liquor or just buying food or a combination thereof. So if you don't, I don't know if square footage then comes into play as much as we go back to the legislation, but the restrictions based on percentage of consumption, where you go back to the 50-50 plan that we're after. I don't have a good sense for that at the moment until we do some more investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a way to get some more information. I know we recently went to From the Earth or Down from the Earth in Roswell and Holcomb Bridge, and I thought it was a nice combination of food and drink, and they had the manufacturing part at the end. I mean, it didn't feel like this raucous bar, but at the same time, it had a good vibe to it without just being all beer or whatever. So.
Okay. What's next, Bernadette?
All right, we can move on to the next slide and talk about some delivery hours. As you know, within Milton, with the waste haulers, they're restricted between 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. Pickups. And we wanted to see if you were interested in having those deliveries restricted to those similar hours for these types of businesses.
That's fine with me. Council?
So I offer up for consideration I know some people who in Crabapple Station that are in close proximity to the restaurants there. And some of the deliveries, the trucks will stage themselves as early as 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And they're idling with their engines are running. They're not delivering during that period of time, but they're staged during that period of time. That's a nuisance to the residents that are there. How does staging, if you're in line to do your delivery, come into play if it's prior to 7:30?
So I think that's something we can look at, because I don't think the form-based code addresses that. The old traditional zoning did, and the original conditional zoning, many times we would have limited hours of delivery, but with the new form-based code, I think that's something that we might be missing to look at.
So yeah, just thinking it through right now, with the kind of the sense of place that we're trying to create. I use Crabapple as the example. Where it's a very walkable community, streets are narrow, there's traffic calming that comes because of that. There's, in the cases of Crabapple Station, there's parking on both sides of the street. You stage a 50-foot semi over there. Even the navigation of the neighborhood is a challenge, because the truck may be blocking going from one end of the street to the other because it's occupied the entire street. Part of that's by design, because we want the traffic calming and the sense of place, the quieter places that comes with that. So we've almost inflicted ourselves with a delivery issue. And you think about the build out of Crabapple, you think about Heritage Way, there are some businesses on Heritage Way that may have to receive deliveries that could be blocking traffic because they have nowhere else to go. So I don't have an answer, but I think we need to take some measure of that stuff.
Perhaps we could, in addition to looking at this in the use permit, we should probably look at it in our regular code, because if you're not going to allow deliveries, we shouldn't allow idling, because the impact is very similar.
Yeah.
Because I think those times are fine, and so.
Yep. I think the stated times are fine for what they're intended to be.
Right.
But it's the
What they're actually
it's
doing,
the
yeah.
unintended consequences of some of that.
So if we can incorporate that language into the use permits, and let's go back and look at the
Yes.
form-based code and
Generally
actually our
for
general code.
retail
Yeah.
and restaurants. Yeah, I think that's, I was just looking at the code today, that the form-based code says that's what it is unless otherwise indicated. So I'm like, well, I know I have other codes in the general zoning ordinance, but it says explicitly that only the form-based code. So I think there's some holes we can start filling in that I think can address those type of issues, as well as in the use permit. So.
All right, Bernadette.
All right, the next topic we were going to talk about was signage. Currently the word bar, since bars are technically prohibited in Milton, the use of that word can only be used when it's indicative of some other type of food service. We talked with Ken Gerard, and he's saying that, it has to be consistent with a reasonable person understanding that food is also available and not using any misleading language. Just wanted to see if we wanted to extend that to these use permits.
So my stab at this was, if you're a 50-50 restaurant, that's one thing. But I think to this, if we're not going to allow a bar, then I don't think we would allow it on the sign. That's just my 2 cents.
Yep.
Yeah. So may I speak to that very quickly? So, the issue we face is any code by a government that tells you what you can put on your sign.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem. And so staff were good enough to come to me, and where I contended myself was if somebody hangs a sign in Milton that, well, just like the example that says Joe's Bar. Okay, I think that's deceptive and misleading, because we don't have, and forget about what the code calls a bar, just what would a reasonable person think is the activity in that establishment? I think it would be a place to consume on premise, bereft of any food requirement, and that would be misleading. Okay, so that's why I'm comfortable we probably can say that. But if somebody's mixed use, and maybe has some food sales, and maybe has some maybe to-go food sales, and maybe even some on-premise food sales, and then also has a wine bar, or even Bernadette, a tequila bar. I got to tell you, if you advertise that as a Joe's food sale plus tequila bar, I don't think that's misleading. I think most reasonable people would understand what is going on there. There's an aspect of some sort of a food sales going on, and then there's some sort of an opportunity to drink at what is considered a bar-like setting, typically sitting around. I hope y'all are getting the distinctions I'm making, and that's where I think we need to camp out is I'm okay that nobody gets to say they're a bar and you can't hang a sign in Milton because that's deceptive and that's. Other than that, they equate it with some element of that's truly accurately depicting what's going on inside the restaurant. I think we need to let that go because otherwise we're getting precariously close to telling people what they can advertise.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. Rick?
His question, and this is more of a signage issue. If I've got a restaurant or a mixed use facility, can I have a second sign that says I'm a bar or I'm a lounge, and that's maybe a question on our current restrictions, or does sign ordinance say, no, you get to choose one advertising your outside sign and your roadside sign versus having listing as two separate establishments?
It depends on the location. It depends on how many, if it's a corner, if it's a unit on a corner building, or whether they just have a front facade. It just depends on the circumstance of the location and type of building it is.
But does the sign have to be exactly the same?
Oh, no, not at all. Let's say if you were on a corner, you could have two signs, and one sign could say A, and then the second sign could say B if they wanted to.
As long as it's not followed by AR.
Yeah.
And I think that bar. And I think that,
Lounge.
or I
Was
think,
that
and I know the
city
specific
manager?
situation that we're discussing right now, and I think that we need to dig further into what the true definition of that other sign would be.
And what the sign ordinance actually allows to go up. Okay, thanks.
Well, I know that there's a particular interest for you, and the second sign does not have the word bar in it, but it has the word lounge.
Right.
What does lounge imply? Does lounge also imply in that kind of a setting alcohol consumption? To me, it does. So it's not necessarily just the word bar.
Right. Well, again, part of it is what does on that specific situation, we're not calling out specifically, but really what are the restrictions even from an advertising? What does our sign ordinance allow? And I know if it's a corner, that's something different. But if it's just along a straightaway where you have one monument sign and it's advertised and then they've got signs on their building, what is it that we allow? I guess that's the thing we probably have to look at this.
2 points. Number one, a close call in this context should go to speech. That's number one, if it's a close call. Number two, I have a feeling this issue will not surface that often. And the reason is because if I am a business owner and I am advertising, come to my establishment, you can drink, and I omit this very vital food requirement that I've got to be able to submit that I'm meeting a certain percentage of sales other than alcohol, and yet I omit that from my signage, I'm doing myself in from a advertising and marketing standpoint because I'm completely omitting something I've got to sell to stay in business.
So with that consideration,
Yes, sir.
help me relate that to what we're being asked to consider. So
I think the ask is do we want in this new code any similar prohibitions on you can't name your establishment? It's just like is in chapter 4 now. And the only point I wanted to say to you is I would be comfortable, can't say by yourself, I am Joe's Bar, or I would even say, or Joe's Lounge. I would be fine with that. I think those both have very commonly understood meanings that would tell a reasonable person, come here and all you're going to do is drink, because that's all we have to offer. And I would be comfortable with us saying, you can't do that because that's deceptive.
Right.
Because they have a food component with it.
because they have a food, and they've got
makes
to, as a
sense.
matter of our code, be selling quite a bit of food in there, and to say a lounge is misleading.
That makes sense.
So, to belabor the point, and I'm sorry to continue it, but tap room. That's implying you're pouring liquor from a tap, alcohol from a tap. It does not imply that there's food consumption. How?
That's closer to me, but okay, I get it. I understand your point. I think I'd like to take a look at the code. Right now, bar and lounge are easy for me.
Yeah.
Tap room by itself, Joe's Tap Room, that at least connotes the same sort of unilateral business model. Really what, I would prefer in a perfect world is that it looks like it can't be, and rather than talk about maybe bar or lounge, I think I had drafted some language that says that would convey to a reasonable viewer of the sign that only on-premise consumption allowed here or is permitted here. I think that's, we could get into calling out bar or lounge, but to me, it's the concept that is more important.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. Bernadette, does that sound good?
Yes, Mayor. So what I'm going to do is I'm
Good.
going to take some time and work with Ken Gerard in his office and try to find any of the terminology that may be kind of indicative of a bar, and we will get that language cleaned up in both Chapter 4 and 64.
All right. Thank you.
So we can move on to the other items to consider. So we would like to just mention two other remaining items. When we went through the Chapter 64, there's also two other types of establishments that would still be required to have a warrant, even if we put these use permits into place. That would be those traditional liquor selling establishments or off-premise retail package stores Robin's going to talk about later this evening. We have one. And also brew pubs. Brew pubs are those breweries or distilleries that also qualify as eating establishments. Is council interested in requiring these types of businesses to have a use permit or continuing to just receive a warrant?
So on the liquor selling establishment, so that's a retail package store. I mean, does anybody, maybe Ken can answer this. What do other municipalities do? Is it by right or is it with the warrant that we use?
Right. I can only speak for what I'm used to, so I couldn't pretend to have surveyed the metro area, but I'm not as familiar with the warrant process in that situation. I'm used to some sort of a commercial zoning accompanied by the appropriate alcohol permit.
I guess the form-based code is what is kind of putting this.
That would handle a lot of it, yes. Warrant.
The only thing I would add to that would potentially be that some of them do have those distance requirements or other additional things in their alcohol code that we may want to look at if we don't have the warrant or use permit.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Because we have the form-based code, it's not like traditional zoning where you have C1 here and we're like, oh, we know, but there's going to be a liquor store here. It's just we have form-based code, and
right.
So I kind of get why we have the warrant there, and I'm actually fine with that.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
But warrant versus use permit?
I think, has there ever been a use permit for a liquor store, I guess? I don't even know.
I don't know.
They do? I don't know. That's what I'm kind of asking. Are we going to be?
Well, that's what I didn't do a very good job of it. I'm not speaking to Milton, but what I'm used to is that there would be the land use element, typically in Euclidean zoning. It's going to be, let's say, just a commercial zoning with maybe a use permit for a package store. And then you'd have your alcohol license that you would apply for after you got your zoning. You're right. In form-based code, that's not exactly a perfect fit because that's not what form-based code is really about.
Right.
It's a more inclusive zoning paradigm.
But because it's alcohol, I'd like to make sure that we take it to the highest level possible for that consideration. It goes through the process. It's subject to the community, the community hearing it as well and having a chance to weigh in. And for example, right now, staff has got a good vision for what council's frame of mind is on this stuff. But no more are we a cast of characters for perpetuity than staff has a cast of characters for perpetuity. Bob goes rogue, and which we know he's so capable of doing. All of a sudden, it's by warrant and it's under Bob's jurisdiction to make that determination. I think that I hate to see Bob go rogue.
Yeah,
If you have a use permit to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm starting to think really the form-based, the form-based code is so unique, and we're coming out with these instances that I don't think we were thinking of years down the road. And so maybe the use permit is the way to go on a lot of this stuff, you know? It's going to be a lot more work on us, but maybe that's.
I can't speak to in the form-based code paradigm, but I will say that is a trend, is the much heavier focus on use permits and much less as of right.
Well, and form-based code has certainly served us well to create the environments that we are now benefiting from. Had we stayed where we were before on traditional land planning, it would have been a much more arduous process to get us to where we are today. If you think about how many times we had to measure what it was and how it was going to fit, now we say, we don't care what goes in there as long as it's consistent with the Milton preferences. We just care what the outside looks like. The market will come to bear on whether the business is successful or not, except when it comes to alcohol. I'd like to make sure we keep those checks and balances.
I would comment that I think the 15 years of the city, in 2013, 14, we were charged with looking at different uses. And I think that came out of trying to figure out who are we as a city? What do we want to have? What do we want to be known as? So like we excluded pawn shops, massage parlors. I mean, other jurisdictions have had to deal with that in difficult situations, and we didn't. And then, like I said, during that time, what we inherited from Fulton County was liquor selling package stores were permitted in C1. Then we changed it to C2. So it's like this evolution of trying to understand what do we want the city to look like, and what types of businesses do we want to promote and encourage. So I think this is just another iteration of trying to figure out what is the best for the city. So
This is just within, this use permit would just be within form-based codes? Or are we talking about all commercial zoning?
So this kind of goes back to what I had said earlier. We have Deerfield and Crabapple, and then we have Birmingham Crossroads, which is more traditional zoning. And right now I can say that if somebody wanted to come in with a liquor package store, they would have to ask for a rezoning to C2 because we have no C2 up there. So that kind of protected that. I think this brew pub idea, it's been, city attorney has determined that it's okay for that manufacturing type, that light manufacturing to be okay in C1 or MIX. So I think that's something to look at is, is that what you want? Going back to that question up at Birmingham Crossroads. So.
I'm having trouble seeing the downside to a use permit citywide on these.
That's kind of what I was getting.
Right.
I am
Yeah.
too. There's not a downside to that, I don't think.
So
if it
So
becomes
if I understand
cumbersome.
correctly, we're looking to go more towards the use permits than the warrants?
won't be that bad.
Exactly, that's gonna be my point. If it ever becomes cumbersome, you have
What
a
I'm
chance to
hearing,
look at it
Bernadette.
again. I don't expect it to be the case. So
That's kind of was my point. It was, I mean, if we're going to make it a use permit in Crabapple and Deerfield, which is our most dense areas, probably should be a use permit on all of it. Just be my guess.
And I think Bernadette's just asking, okay, we haven't really dealt with the liquor selling establishments or the brew pubs. So to throw those into the pot with the use permits. Okay.
Okay, that was my last slide. I really appreciate everyone bearing through this format and also all of Robin's help. If anyone has any additional questions or feedback for Robin and I, will be happy to take it to ensure we get it worked into those use permits.
No, but I'll call for public comment if everybody's good with that.
We do, Mayor. I welcome Mary Cronk to the podium, please.
I'm Mary Cronk. I live at 600 Hickory Mill Lane near Birmingham Crossroads, my favorite area. What I wanted to say was I definitely support keeping Birmingham area, that Crossroads area, at a 50-50. Not only because that was really the original concept We've got really nice areas that would be better for that commercial or that type of development in Deerfield and Crabapple. I don't think Birmingham, in just the structure itself, and there's the park nearby, we've got schools. I mean, it has a different feel, more of a neighborhood feel that I don't think would support those types of, other than a 50-50. The other thing to consider is the sewer system. When we're thinking about Birmingham Crossroads, part of that development area works off of that Publix sewer system. And there's a very limited amount. In fact, when they build out in the crossroads of Birmingham and they do the 2 buildings, a commercial, there's no more sewer for that part of it. So we have to really be careful about what we put in there. Can we support even more restaurants? So those are a couple things. The other thing is that I do think the word lounge does have the connotation that you're all talking about. In Birmingham Crossroads, there was a business that opened not too long ago right next to I Love New York Pizza. They were originally going to call themselves Mediterranean Lounge, and they'd advertised it as Mediterranean Lounge. When they actually opened the business, they made a very good decision and called it Milton Mediterranean Cuisine. Has a totally different, when you're looking at it, do I want to go to the lounge or do I want to go to Mediterranean cuisine? So I think there are some words that we wouldn't want to have by themselves. Just a couple of feedbacks. And I really appreciate all the time and attention you guys are putting to this. This is really important stuff and will have a huge impact on our future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Valid public comment.
That concludes, Mayor. Thank you.
Any other questions for Bernadette or Robin? All right, if you'll please say on the next item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. That next item is discussion of requested warrant to permit a liquor selling establishment, liquid liquor package store by MDA Novel located at 13020 Morris Road, Suites J, H, and G within the T5 Transect Zone within the Deerfield Form-Based Code. Ms. Robin McDonald.
I'm back. Talking about alcohol. Anyway, again, the request, we're just trying to get some feedback from you all, but it's a request to allow liquor selling establishment, i.e. liquor package store at 13020 Morris Road, that would be within 3 suites combined. The current zoning is T6 within the form-based code, and the applicant is MDA Novel. So tonight, our goal is to receive some input from the mayor and city council regarding this request. And the objective in the end is to continue smart land planning to keep Milton unique. This is one of the objectives that were brought in on the 2040 plan. So liquor selling establishments require the approval of a warrant in order to apply for an alcohol license in T6 within the form-based code of Deerfield. So warrants are administrative approvals issued by the Community Development Department or the director within the 2 form-based code areas, like I mentioned. So I just want to, this is a little snippet from, there's a nice long table that describes the different transect zones. You can see from T2 all the way up to T6 within Deerfield specifically. And here under D, retail, it's one of many retail type uses. Liquor selling establishment requires a warrant at this time for T4 open, T5, and T6. So just want to point out that's what the code dictates for us to do. So getting back specifically to this request, to just give some context, this is Webb Road, Morris Road, and it's right here at the corner. There is a convenience store, gas station as well with some Subway and a Mexican restaurant, your typical little strip center. And then here are the 3 suites that are being requested to be turned into the liquor package store. So there you go. I just want to talk a little bit about what is near it and specifically about the different existing liquor selling establishments. The first 3 were adopted or licensed prior to our form-based code, and some of them for sure before we even were incorporated. A is Beverage Depot at the Forsyth County line with Milton. B is in the public shopping center, the beverage shop. So C is, we'll go further down south, is Top Shelf Liquors that was referred to earlier by the Kroger, but it's within our jurisdiction with the drive-through. So those are the three that have been existing, and more recently, we issued a warrant February of 2021 for Milton Package, which is located just south of the Kohl's store in a portion of the Strip shopping center. And then I want to just point out there's Montessori Scholars Academy. That's catty corner and from the property. As I mentioned earlier in the last presentation, part of what we look at when we look at a warrant for use is we are directed by the ordinance to look at the use considerations, just like we would in a use permit. So one of those use considerations is compatibility with land uses and zoning districts in the vicinity of the property for which the use permit is proposed, or in this instance, the proposed store. And then secondly, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? And there are other considerations that include, does it violate ordinances and regulations, other, state, local? What is the parking? Is there protective screening? How do you get in and out of the property? The flow of traffic, open space, hours of operation, and outdoor lighting. And just to make note that the applicant is requesting the same hours of operation as what's permitted in Chapter 4. And in my next slide, I'll talk a little bit about that. So the proposed location of the liquor package store is located across the street from Deerfield Green Townhomes and Deerfield Apartments to the north. Although it appears to meet the distance requirement from an educational building of not less than 200 yards, it is approximately 300 yards from the Montessori Scholars Academy. Then there are two existing liquor selling establishments 1 mile away from the subject site. So let me just go back to this area. So if you, here's the star of the proposed store. And then if you see the one at D and C, that's approximately about 1 mile away in either direction. So if you go to D, it's 1 mile. If you go to C, it's 1 mile. So just wanted to point that out. And then also within this strip center, I mentioned the convenience store also already sells beer and wine in that shopping center. It appears that it's inconsistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan, that the land uses and policies, the land use issues of the 2040 comprehensive plan. I'm sorry, there's a little bit different wording than the previous plan, so I'm not used to that. But policy 6 is we support appropriate residential and non-residential infill development and redevelopment in ways that complement surrounding areas. So we're just asking from you all, do you support the approval of the requested warrant? And just to concentrate a little bit more about the land issues and the consistency with the comprehensive plan and with nearby and adjoining uses, just the different items that I pointed out, the closeness of other package stores. There's a school nearby. It is a little bit off the beaten path, off the corridor, the commercial corridor, and there are houses literally across the street from this proposed store. So again, we're just seeking input from you all. Do you support the approval of the requested warrant? And if yes, you do, then staff has provided possible conditions to the warrant. We've done that in the past for other warrants here in Crabapple to set limitations, such as prohibiting tobacco products, vaping products, CBD products, and lottery products to be sold. No video or games of chance, and then more restrictive hours of operation than Chapter 4. So below, I've outlined what those hours of operation that are permitted in the alcohol ordinance, of which the applicant is requesting those same hours of operation. So with that, let's see. Oh. Okay, I guess that's it.
All right,
So I
thank
just
you.
want to seek any kind of input, or if you have questions for me, or
All right, Council?
staff.
Oh, I was saying double. Councilman Moore?
Robin, is the gas station literally part of the same
It
development?
is, yeah.
Is it like 100 feet away? Is it?
It's maybe 3 or 4, I don't know. I mean, it's like
I'm
3 or
looking at it on the
4.
map. It's right there. pretty much.
Yeah, like one end of it's the gas station, the other
Yeah,
end is.
That's right there.
Right next to it.
Maybe 3 or 4 suites, and then you
Yeah.
get to the convenience.
Well,
store.
if they're going to take up 3 or 4 of those, all of
Right.
a sudden it's 1 or 2 or none. Yeah, I'm inclined to say no, just because of the proximity to the surrounding community that's there, the residential component of that. And I think the gas station probably is sufficient to meet some of the basic alcohol availability there, when you've also got some other full-service package stores in the nearby area. I just think I think it's unnecessary creep of that kind of a business into a residential area. That's not really necessary.
I'll say my only thing was, I was didn't have an opinion beforehand, but when I saw how big it was, that could change the corner.
Yeah.
That could change the area. That's just my.
I just don't see the need for another beverage store when there's 2 less than a mile away in either direction. I personally don't see the need.
Yep, I agree. I think, Robin, you kind of built the case that, showing us the proximity of the other facilities that sell, the homes across the street, the school that close. I don't think I could support that.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing it to us. This is where the warrant process kind of can work sometimes.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
If that will do it, that will conclude the meeting, and happy Valentine's Day to all. So, thank you. See ya.